Imagine, if you will, that you are waking up not in your comfortable modern bed, but on a humble straw mattress in a small, dimly lit room with rough-hewn stone walls. The air is cool and heavy with the sense of wood smoke, earth, and perhaps a hint of livestock. The only sound is the soft crackle of a single candle flame, casting dancing shadows on the walls. You might feel a moment of disorientation, a sense that something is not quite right. And indeed, it isn't. For somehow, through some strange twist of fate or dream, you have found yourself transported to medieval times. But fear not, for this is not a nightmare, but an opportunity to experience a different way of life, to walk in the footsteps of peasants and kings, to witness the triumphs and struggles that shape the world we know today. And all from the comfort and safety of your own bed. So take a deep breath, let your body relax into the mattress, and allow your mind to drift back through the centuries, to a time of castles and cathedrals, of chivalry and plague, of great faith and even greater change. Our journey begins in the English countryside, in a small village not unlike countless others that dotted the landscape in the Middle Ages. Here, life revolves around the rhythms of the land, the turning of the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, the endless cycle of planting and harvest. You find yourself inhabiting the life of a peasant farmer, one of the great mass of humanity who toiled from dawn to dusk to coax a living from the soil. Your day begins before the first light of dawn as you rise from your straw bed to the sound of a rooster's crow, a sound that has echoed across the centuries, unchanged. You dress simply in a rough-spun tunic and breeches, perhaps with a woolen cloak to ward off the morning chill. Your first task is to tend to the animals, feeding the chickens that peck around your feet, milking the goat that provides precious sustenance for your family, and perhaps harnessing the great ox that will help you plough the fields. As you go about your morning chores, take a moment to breathe in the sense of this simple, rustic life. The earthy musk of the animals, the sweet sharpness of the hay, the cool dampness of the earth beneath your feet. These are the smells of a life lived close to the land, a life of hard work and simple pleasures. With the animals tended, you return to your small, one-room cottage where your family is beginning to stir. Together, you break your fast on a simple meal of barley porridge and stale bread, washed down with a cup of weak ale. The flavours are plain, but hearty, fuel for the long day of work ahead. As the sun rises over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, you set out for the fields, ready to begin the back-breaking labour that is the lot of the medieval peasant. With your ox and plough, you turn the rich, dark earth, preparing it for the planting of crops, wheat and barley, rye and oats, the staples that will feed you and your family through the long winter months. The work is hard, and the days are long. You feel the sun beating down on your back, the sweat trickling down your face, the ache in your muscles as you push yourself to keep pace with the turning of the plough. But there is also a certain satisfaction in this labour, a sense of purpose and place in the grand scheme of things. As a peasant, your life is not your own. You are bound to the land and to the local lord who owns it, obligated to work his fields and pay him a portion of your harvest in exchange for his protection. It is a simple arrangement, but one that defines the lives of millions across medieval Europe. But even in this humble existence, there is room for dreams and ambitions. As you work the fields, your mind might drift to the young boy running between the furrows, laughing as he chases after a butterfly or plays at sword fighting with a stick. Little do you know that this carefree child, born a peasant like yourself, is destined for greatness, for a rise to power that will shape the very course of history. His name is William, and his story is one of the great tales of the Middle Ages. Born into poverty, orphaned at a young age, William's life takes a remarkable turn when he is taken in by a local lord and made his squire. It is a rare opportunity for a peasant boy, a chance to escape the life of toil and servitude that is the fate of most. William seizes this chance with both hands. He learns quickly, absorbing the arts of horsemanship and swordsmanship, the intricacies of courtly etiquette and military strategy. He grows into a formidable young man, tall and strong, with a quick mind and a natural air of authority. His talents do not go unnoticed. William catches the eye of the powerful Duke of Normandy, who sees in him a kindred spirit, a man of ambition and cunning who could be a valuable ally. The Duke takes William under his wing, knights him, and grants him lands and titles of his own. It is a dizzying rise for a former peasant, but William is just getting started. He has his sights set on an even greater prize, the English throne itself. Through a combination of political manoeuvring, strategic alliances, and outright ruthlessness, William positions himself as a claimant to the crown, and when the old English king dies without a clear heir, he seizes his chance. In 1066, William gathers a vast army and sets sail across the English Channel, ready to stake his claim with blood and iron. His invasion force lands on the southern coast of England, where they are met by the English army, led by the new king Harold Godwinson. The stage is set for one of the most famous battles in medieval history, the Battle of Hastings. On a field near the small coastal village, the two armies clash in a desperate struggle for the fate of a nation. The English are formidable foes, fierce warriors who fight with the strength of men defending their homeland. They form an impenetrable shield wall, their battle axes and spears bristling like the quills of some great hedgehog. For hours they hold firm against the onslaught of the Norman cavalry, repelling charge after charge. But William is a cunning commander, and he has a trick up his sleeve. He orders his cavalry to feign a retreat, drawing the English out from their defensive positions. And then, when the moment is right, he wheels his horsemen around and charges, smashing into the exposed English flanks. It is a devastating tactic, and it turns the tide of the battle. By day's end, the field is strewn with the bodies of the slain, and the English army is in full retreat. King Harold himself is dead, struck down by an arrow to the eye. William stands victorious, the crown of England now firmly within his grasp. On Christmas Day, 1066, he is crowned king in Westminster Abbey, ushering in a new era of Norman rule that will transform the country forever. The Norman conquest, as it comes to be known, is a watershed moment in English history. It brings with it sweeping changes to the language, culture, and power structures of the nation. French becomes the language of the court and the nobility, while English is relegated to the speech of the common folk. The old Anglo-Saxon aristocracy is uprooted and replaced by William's loyal Norman barons, who are granted vast tracts of land to secure their allegiance. These barons waste no time in asserting their newfound power and prestige. Across the countryside, the landscape begins to change as the Normans embark on a massive program of castle building. Motter and Bailey, castles spring up like mushrooms after a rain. Great earthen mounds topped with wooden keeps, surrounded by deep ditches and sturdy palisades. These early castles are relatively simple affairs, built more for function than form. But over time, as Norman rule becomes more entrenched, they give way to ever larger and more elaborate fortifications. Stone replaces wood, and the classic medieval castle takes shape. A towering keep surrounded by thick curtain walls, with soaring towers and crenellated battlements, all encircled by a wide, deep moat. For the Norman elite, these castles are more than just military strongholds. They are symbols of wealth and power, the physical embodiment of their dominance over the conquered English. Within their walls, the great lords and ladies play out the rituals and intrigues of courtly life, dining on sumptuous feasts in the Great Hall, entertained by minstrels and jesters. But life in a medieval castle is not all pomp and pleasure. It is also a hive of industry and activity, a small town unto itself. In the bailey, the blacksmith's forge glows red as he hammers out swords and armour, while fletchers carefully craft arrows and bowstrings. Men-at-arms train in the yard, the clash of their practice swords ringing off the stone walls. And in times of trouble, the castle becomes a refuge, a place of safety for noble and commoner alike. When war or unrest threatens, the drawbridge is raised, the portcullis lowered, and the great gates swung shut, sealing the castle and its inhabitants off from the dangers of the outside world. But the castle is not the only bastion of power and authority in the medieval landscape. Equally impressive, and in some ways even more influential, are the great cathedrals and monasteries that dot the countryside, soaring monuments to the might and grandeur of the Catholic Church. In an age where faith is the cornerstone of daily life, the Church wields immense power and influence. It is the guardian of learning and knowledge, the arbiter of morality and justice, the gateway to salvation and eternal life. To be in the good graces of the Church is to be in the good graces of God Himself. The monasteries, in particular, serve as crucial centres of learning and culture. Within their cloistered walls, monks painstakingly copy and illuminate manuscripts, preserving the wisdom of the ancients and the teachings of the Church. They are also economic powerhouses, with vast landholdings worked by peasants and serfs, producing wool, grain, and other valuable commodities. For many, the Church provides the only path to education and social advancement. The sons of nobles and wealthy merchants might be sent to the monasteries to be trained as scholars and clerics, while the daughters are dispatched to convents to be educated in the womanly arts of needlework and household management. But the Church is not just a benevolent force. It is also a source of great fear and superstition, a stern and often unforgiving taskmaster. From the pulpit, preachers rail against the sins of greed, lust, and gluttony, warning of the eternal torments that await the unrepentant sinner in the fires of hell. For some, this message of salvation through suffering and self-denial is a call to a higher purpose. The Benedictine monks, for example, take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, withdrawing from the world into a life of prayer and contemplation. They rise before dawn to chant the divine office, spend their days in silent study and manual labour, and retire to their sparse cells at night for a few hours of sleep on a hard straw mattress. But not all men of the Church are so austere. The powerful abbots and bishops are often as involved in worldly affairs as any secular lord, engaging in politics and diplomacy, even leading armies into battle in defence of their lands and interests. The line between spiritual and temporal power is often blurred, and the struggle for supremacy between church and state is a constant undercurrent of medieval life. Nowhere is this struggle more evident than in the great drama of the Crusades. In 1195, Pope Urban II issues a call to arms, urging the knights of Europe to take up the cross and embark on a holy mission to free Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Muslim rule. It is a clarion call that will echo across the centuries, setting in motion a series of wars that will shape the course of history. For the crusading knights, it is a chance for glory and salvation, an opportunity to prove their valour and piety on the field of battle. They sew the cross onto their surcoats and shields and set out for the east, leaving behind their homes and families for the promise of eternal reward. But the reality of the Crusades is far from the noble ideal. The journey to the Holy Land is long and perilous, through hostile lands and treacherous seas. Many never make it, falling victim to disease, starvation, or the swords of the enemy. And when they finally reach Jerusalem, they find a city already steeped in blood and sorrow. The Crusaders capture the Holy City in 1099, after a brutal siege that leaves the streets running red with the blood of the slain. They establish a series of Christian kingdoms in the Levant. But holding this distant territory is a constant struggle against a determined Muslim foe. More crusades follow over the next 2 centuries, each seeking to shore up the fragile gains of the last. For the people of the Holy Land, caught between the warring factions, the Crusades are a time of great suffering and upheaval. Villages are burned, crops destroyed, innocent lives lost in the crossfire of holy war. The seeds of enmity between Christians and Muslims, sown in the heat of battle, will take root and grow, bearing bitter fruit for generations to come. But the Crusades also have unintended consequences. They expose Europeans to the riches and sophistication of the East, to new ideas and ways of thinking that will help to fuel the great intellectual and artistic awakening of the Renaissance. Crusaders return home with spices, silks, and other exotic goods, stoking the fires of trade and commerce. The world, once so vast and mysterious, begins to shrink, the horizons of the possible expanding with each passing year. But for the common folk of Europe, life remains a daily struggle, a constant battle against hunger, disease, and the vagaries of fate. Even as the great tides of history sweep across the continent, the rhythms of peasant life remain largely unchanged, dictated by the turning of the seasons and the demands of the land. Until, that is, the coming of the Black Death. In the 14th century, a new and terrifying threat emerges from the east, a pestilence that will leave no corner of Europe untouched. It starts as a rumour, whispers of a strange sickness that strikes down young and old alike, leaving entire cities choked with the dead. When the plague arrives in 1347, carried on ships from the Crimea, it spreads like wildfire. The disease is borne by fleas on the backs of rats, and it moves with frightening speed, leaping from port to port, town to town, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The symptoms are horrific: fever and chills, vomiting and diarrhea, the telltale swollen black buboes that give the pestilence its name. Most who contract the disease die within days, their bodies piled in the streets to be collected by the dead carts that roll through the towns and villages. Panic and despair grip the populace. Some flee to the countryside, hoping to escape the contagion, but the plague follows them, striking down whole families, whole villages. Others turn to superstition and scapegoating, blaming Jews or witches for the calamity. Still others see it as a punishment from God, a divine reckoning for the sins of man. The death toll is staggering. By the time the worst has passed, between 1/3 and 1/2 of Europe's population has perished. Fields lie fallow for want of workers to tend them. Entire towns are abandoned to the rats and the weeds. The social and economic impact is profound and far-reaching. In the aftermath of the plague, labour is suddenly scarce. Peasants, once bound to the land, find themselves in a position to demand better wages and more rights from their lords. The old feudal order begins to crumble, as serfs and freemen alike seek a better life in the towns and cities. But the spectre of the plague is not so easily banished. It will return in waves for centuries to come, a grim reminder of the fragility of life in the face of an indifferent universe. Even as Europe reels from the devastation of the Black Death, another great calamity looms on the horizon. In the rolling fields of France and the muddy pastures of England, 2 great powers are locked in a struggle for supremacy that will consume a generation. The 100 Years' War, as it comes to be known, is a conflict born of dynastic ambition and national pride. It begins as a dispute over the French crown, with England's King Edward III claiming the throne through his mother's line. But it quickly escalates into a bitter struggle for territory and influence as the 2 kingdoms vie for control of the rich lands of Aquitaine and Normandy. The war is marked by great. As the morning sun filters through the narrow window of your cottage, you awaken to the sound of a rooster crowing in the distance. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. You stretch and rise from your straw mattress, your body aching from the previous day's labours in the fields. Life as a medieval peasant is not easy, but it is the only life you have ever known. Your days are ruled by the rhythms of the seasons and the demands of your feudal lord. You are but one small piece in the great hierarchical puzzle of medieval society, bound by duty and tradition. You splash some cold water on your face from a wooden basin and don a simple woolen tunic and breeches. There is no time to linger. There are animals to feed, crops to tend, and 1,000 other tasks that require your attention. You break your fast with a humble meal of stale bread and weak ale, the staples of the peasant diet. As you step out into the muddy lane that runs through your village, you are greeted by the sights and sounds of daily life in the Middle Ages. The blacksmith's hammer rings out as he toils over his anvil, shaping iron into tools and horseshoes. The baker pulls loaves of bread from his clay oven, their aroma wafting through the crisp morning air. Children dart between the timber-framed houses, laughing and playing with crude wooden toys. At the centre of the village stands the small stone church, its bell tolling to mark the hours of prayer. The church is the heart of village life, providing not only spiritual guidance, but also serving as a place of sanctuary and community gathering. The local priest is one of the few literate people in the village, and he serves as a conduit to the wider world beyond the manor. Beyond the village lie the strip fields, where you and your fellow peasants toil to raise crops for your own sustenance and to pay your rents and tithes to your lord. The work is backbreaking and never-ending, but there is a certain satisfaction in coaxing life from the soil and watching the crops grow tall and strong under the summer sun. As you work, you might exchange news and gossip with your fellow labourers. Talk of the weather, the health of the livestock, the latest proclamations from the Lord's manor house. In a world where most people live and die within a few miles of their birthplace, even small tidbits of information from beyond the village are precious. Life is hard, but it is not without its small joys and comforts. In the evenings, you might gather with your family and friends around the hearth, telling stories and singing songs handed down through generations. On holy days and festivals, there is music and dancing, a chance to set aside the daily toil and celebrate the turning of the seasons. But even as you go about your daily routines, you cannot escape the reminders of the rigid social order that structures medieval life. Everywhere there are signs of the power and wealth of the nobility and the church, in the grand manor houses and monasteries that dot the landscape, in the fine clothes and rich foods enjoyed by the elite, in the deference and respect demanded by your social betters. And yet, change is coming to the medieval world, even if it is not yet apparent to those living through it. New ideas and technologies are beginning to circulate, eroding old certainties. The growth of towns and trade is giving rise to a new middle class, one that will challenge the traditional hierarchy. The plague that periodically sweeps through the land, leaving devastation in its wake, also loosens the bonds of feudalism as labour becomes scarce and peasants gain a measure of bargaining power. But for now, as you toil in the fields and live out your life in the small world of your village, the medieval order remains intact. Your place in it is fixed, your duties and obligations clear. You are a part of a great chain of being, a link between the soil and the heavens, the temporal and the eternal. As the sun begins to set over the fields, you make your way back to your cottage, your body weary but your heart full. You have lived another day in the medieval world, a world of hardship and struggle, but also of community and tradition. As you drift off to sleep on your straw mattress, you dream of a world beyond the confines of your village, a world of castles and cathedrals, of knights and ladies, of adventure and glory. But for now, that world remains tantalizingly out of reach, a shimmering vision in the twilight of your mind. The next day brings more of the same, the endless cycle of sowing and reaping, of tending to animals and mending fences. But even in the midst of this daily grind, there are moments of beauty and grace. The sound of the church bell ringing out across the fields, calling the faithful to prayer. The sight of a hawk wheeling high overhead, silhouetted against a cloudless blue sky. The laughter of children as they play in the village square, their voices echoing off the timber-framed houses. And always, there are the stories. Tales of great heroes and saints, of miracles and marvels, passed down from generation to generation. In a world where most people cannot read or write, these stories are the lifeblood of culture, the threads that bind the community together. You might hear tales of the great King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table defending the realm against the forces of evil, or of the saintly King Edward the Confessor, who could cure scrofula with his touch, of the brave knights who ventured to the Holy Land on crusade, seeking to reclaim Jerusalem for Christendom. These stories offer a glimpse of a wider world beyond the confines of the village, a world of high adventure and noble deeds. They inspire and uplift, reminding you that even the lowliest peasant can aspire to greatness through faith and valor. But the stories also serve another purpose, to reinforce the social order and the values that underpin it. The tales of chivalrous knights and virtuous ladies, of wise kings and holy saints, all serve to buttress the hierarchy of medieval society, to make it seem natural and ordained by God. And so you listen to these stories, absorbing their lessons and their morals, even as you go about your daily tasks. They become part of the fabric of your life, shaping your understanding of the world and your place within it. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, the rhythms of medieval life continue their eternal cycle. The seasons change, from the soft greens of spring to the rich golds of autumn. Babies are born and old folks die, the great wheel of life turning on. And through it all, the land endures, the fields and forests, the rivers and hills that have sustained generations of peasants like yourself. It is a hard life, a life of toil and struggle, but it is also a life deeply rooted in the soil, in the timeless patterns of nature. In moments of quiet reflection, you might ponder the mysteries of the world, the great questions that have puzzled humanity since the dawn of time. What is the purpose of life? What lies beyond the veil of death? How can one live a good and righteous life in a world so full of suffering and injustice? The Church offers answers to these questions, but they are not always satisfying. The priests speak of the need for faith and obedience, for acceptance of one's lot in life. They promise the rewards of heaven for those who follow the teachings of Christ, but the heaven they describe seems far removed from the daily realities of peasant life. And yet, there is something comforting in the rituals and rhythms of the Church. The solemn Mass, the flickering candles, the smell of incense. In a world that can often seem harsh and unpredictable, the Church provides a measure of stability and continuity, a link to a higher power and a greater purpose. And so you continue on day by day, season by season, living out your life in the shadow of the great medieval order. You marry and have children of your own, passing on the skills and knowledge of your ancestors. You weather the storms of life, the failed harvests and the outbreaks of disease, the petty cruelties of your feudal overlords. Through it all, you hold fast to the values that have sustained your people for generations. The values of hard work and perseverance, of loyalty and community, of faith and fortitude. These are the values that have enabled peasants like yourself to endure through centuries of hardship, to carve out a life from the stubborn soil of medieval Europe. And as you lay on your deathbed, surrounded by your children and grandchildren, you can look back on a life well lived, a life of humble service and quiet dignity. You may not have achieved great fame or fortune, but you have played your part in the great tapestry of medieval life, adding your own small thread to the vast and intricate weave. As you close your eyes for the final time, you can take comfort in the knowledge that the world will go on without you, that the fields will still be ploughed and the prayers still said, that the stories will still be told and the songs still sung. For in the end, it is not the individual that matters, but the community, the great chain of being that links the lowliest peasant to the mightiest king, the living to the dead, the temporal to the eternal. And so you slip away, your soul winging its way to the great beyond, leaving behind the cares and sorrows of the mortal world. You have lived and loved, struggled and overcome, and now you can rest in the peace of the ages, secure in the knowledge that your life, however humble, has been a part of something greater, a small but vital thread in the vast tapestry of human history. As the years turn into decades and the decades into centuries, the medieval world that you knew slowly fades away, giving way to new eras and new ways of thinking. But the legacy of that world lives on, in the stones of the great cathedrals and castles, in the words of the poets and philosophers, in the values and traditions that continue to shape our world today. And through it all, the land endures, the fields and forests, the rivers and hills that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless generations. It is a reminder of the fleeting nature of human life, of the great cycles of birth and death, growth and decay that govern the natural world. But it is also a reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit, of the ability of ordinary people to face the challenges of their time with courage and grace, to find meaning and purpose in even the most difficult of circumstances. As we look back on the medieval world from the vantage point of the present, we can see it in all its complexity and contradiction, a world of great beauty and great brutality, of towering achievements and terrible injustices. But we can also see it as a world of deep humanity, a world in which people like yourself lived and loved, dreamed and despaired, just as we do today. And so, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander back to that distant time and place, to the fields and villages of medieval Europe. Let yourself imagine the lives of the peasants and the nobles, the priests and the artisans, all playing their parts in the great drama of human history. And as you do so, take comfort in the knowledge that your own life, however small and insignificant it may seem, is also a part of that great story, a thread in the tapestry of human experience that stretches back to the dawn of time and forward into the unknown future. For in the end, that is the great lesson of the medieval world, that each of us, no matter our station or circumstances, has a role to play in the unfolding of history, that each of us is called to live our lives with purpose and meaning, to strive for something greater than ourselves. And so, as you slip into the realm of dreams, let the wisdom of the ages guide your path. Let the echoes of the past whisper in your ear, and know that, even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, always the possibility of a brighter tomorrow. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders of the medieval world, with the courage and resilience of the human spirit that has endured through the centuries. May you wake refreshed and renewed, ready to face the challenges of your own time, with the same grace and fortitude as those who came before you. And may you always remember that, no matter how small and insignificant you may feel, you are a part of something greater, a link in the great chain of being that connects us all, across the ages and across the world. Sleep well, and may the blessings of the medieval world be with you always. The story of the rise of King William is a testament to the fluid nature of social mobility in the medieval era, even amidst the rigid hierarchy of the feudal system. Born a peasant, William's life took a dramatic turn when he came under the tutelage of a local lord who recognized his potential and brought him into his household as a squire. Under the lord's guidance, William learned the arts of war and statecraft, honing his skills in horsemanship, swordsmanship, and leadership. His natural abilities and quick wit caught the eye of the powerful Duke of Normandy, who eventually took William into his own service and knighted him. William's rise through the ranks of the Norman aristocracy was meteoric. He quickly became one of the Duke's most trusted advisors, displaying a keen political acumen and a ruthless determination to succeed. When the old Duke died without a clear heir, William saw his chance to seize power. Through a combination of diplomacy, bribery, and sheer force of will, William outmaneuvered his rivals and secured the support of key Norman nobles. He was crowned Duke of Normandy in 1035, at the age of just 20. But William's ambitions did not stop there. He had long believed that he had a claim to the English throne through his distant relation to the childless King Edward the Confessor. When Edward died in 1066, William saw his opportunity to make that claim a reality. Gathering a massive army and fleet, William launched a daring invasion of England, landing on the south coast and marching towards London. His path was blocked by the English king Harold Godwinson, who had himself only recently taken the throne. The two armies met at the Battle of Hastings, a pivotal moment in English history. The battle was long and bloody, with the English fighting bravely but ultimately falling to the superior Norman cavalry and archers. King Harold was killed, reputedly by an arrow through the eye, and the English resistance crumbled. William's victory at Hastings marked the beginning of a new era in English history. He was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day, 1066, taking the name William the Conqueror. As king, William set about consolidating his power and reshaping English society in the Norman mould. He distributed lands and titles to his loyal Norman followers, displacing the old Anglo-Saxon aristocracy. He commissioned a great survey of the kingdom, known as the Domesday Book, to assess its wealth and resources. And he began a massive program of castle building to secure his rule and subdue any potential resistance. But William's reign was not without its challenges. He faced repeated uprisings from disaffected English nobles, as well as incursions from the Scots and the Welsh. He struggled to balance the competing demands of his Norman and English subjects, and to integrate the two cultures into a cohesive whole. Through it all, however, William remained a formidable and effective ruler, known for his military prowess, his political cunning, and his fierce determination. He left a lasting legacy on English history, transforming the country's language, laws, and institutions, and setting the stage for centuries of Norman rule. The story of William the Conqueror is a reminder of the complex interplay of individual agency and historical forces that shaped the medieval world. It is a tale of ambition and conquest, of the rise of a lowly peasant to the heights of power and influence. But it is also a tale of the great tides of history, of the clash of cultures and the forging of new identities, of the enduring impact that one life can have on the course of human events. And so, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind linger on the image of William, the peasant turned king, riding at the head of his Norman host, his banner flying high above the fields of England. Let his story be a reminder of the potential for greatness that lies within each of us, no matter our humble beginnings, and of the power of the human will to shape the world around us. Good night, and may the spirit of William the Conqueror guide your dreams and inspire you to seize your own destiny with the same courage and determination that he showed on the battlefields of medieval Europe. May you wake with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility, ready to make your own mark on the great tapestry of human history. Sleep well, and may the blessings of the medieval world be with you always. The Renaissance is dawning as you lay your weary head down to sleep. The medieval world is beginning to stir with new ideas, new possibilities. But for most, daily life remains a familiar routine of toil and simple pleasures. You're a craftsman in a bustling town, rising with the sun to begin your work. The streets are already alive with activity as you make your way to your workshop. Bakers pull steaming loaves from their ovens, the aroma of fresh bread mingling with the stench of the open sewers. Hawkers cry their wares: fresh fish, ripe cheeses, newly dyed cloth in vibrant hues. In your workshop you set to your task, skillfully carving wood or shaping metal. Perhaps you're a carpenter, crafting sturdy furniture and the beams for the new houses springing up as the town grows. Or maybe a blacksmith, your forge breathing heat as you hammer out tools, horseshoes, and the occasional sword or breastplate for the local lord's men-at-arms. Your craft is your livelihood and your pride. You learned it from your father, as he did from his, skills passed down through generations. Your pieces are sought after in the town market and beyond. Merchants carry them to far-off cities and even abroad. A fine table you made graces the hall of the local manor. As you work, the town life swirls around you. The ringing of church bells marks the hours of prayer. A procession of monks passes by, chanting in Latin. In the town square, a jester entertains a crowd with bawdy jokes and sleight of hand, his motley costume a splash of colour against the half-timbered houses. Occasionally, excitement ripples through the town. A travelling merchant arrives, his wagons laden with exotic spices, gleaming silks, strange mechanical devices. He brings news, too, of wars in foreign lands, of the latest fashions in the royal court, of a new kind of learning stirring in the universities. Some of these new ideas trickle down to your workshop. A learned client requests a classical motif carved into his bookcase. A painter friend experiments with the rules of perspective, creating astonishingly lifelike scenes. A well-travelled merchant describes the water-driven machines he saw in the Arab lands, sparking your imagination. But for the most part, your concerns are more immediate. Will you finish the big order in time for the fair? Will your son prove as adept at the craft as you hope? Will the coin you earn be enough to put meat on the table and wood in the fire? The rhythms of your days are guided by the demands of your trade and the needs of your family. In the evenings, you gather in the town tavern, trading stories and news with your fellow craftsmen over a mug of ale. The concerns of kings and popes seem far away, though you dutifully pray for their souls and pay your tithes. Your world is here, in the town you've known all your life, in the work of your hands and the faces of your loved ones. As night falls, you make your way home, the streets quieting as shutters are drawn and candles snuffed. In your small but tidy house, you share a simple meal with your family, a pottage of vegetables and barley, a hunk of bread, perhaps a bit of cheese or sausage. You give thanks for the day's blessings, for the skill of your hands and the love of your kin. Later, in the darkness of your bedchamber, you reflect on the day and the days to come. Your life is not an easy one. There are always challenges, always uncertainties. But it is a life of purpose and of pride, shaped by the traditions of your craft and the bonds of your community. As you drift off to sleep, the soft breathing of your loved ones around you, you dream of the work you'll do tomorrow and the days after that, of the things you'll make, the stories you'll tell, the life you'll build, one day at a time, in this world that is changing, slowly but surely, around you. The Renaissance is coming, with all its tumult and its glory. But for now, in this moment, there is peace. The peace of a job well done, a family well loved, a place in the world, however humble, that is yours. It's a peace hard-earned by generations before you, a peace you'll pass on to those who come after. So rest now, craftsmen of the Middle Ages. Rest and dream of a world that is ending, and a world that is yet to be. The dawn will come, as it always does, and with it, another day to make your mark, however small, on the pages of history. Sleep, as your ancestors slept, and your descendants will sleep, under the same stars, dreaming the same dreams. The eternal human dream of a life lived with meaning, with skill, with love. The dream that carries us through the ages, from the distant past to the unknown future. The dream that connects us all, in the end, no matter the time or the place. The dream of home, of purpose, of peace. Good night, dear craftsman. Good night and sweet dreams, as the medieval world slips softly into the Renaissance, and the cycle of history turns on, inexorably, through the long, quiet night. And so we leave you, drifting gently into the waiting arms of sleep, as the soft sounds of the medieval town fade into the distance. The murmur of the crowd, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the call of the crier, all melt away into the hush of night. In their place, the timeless lullaby of history whispers through the darkness. The soft footfalls of the generations who came before, the gentle breathing of those yet to come, all joined in the endless dance of time, rising and falling like the tides, like the phases of the moon. And through it all, the human spirit endures, constant as the northern star, the spirit of creativity, of community, of hope, the spirit that built the cathedrals and the castles, that illuminated the manuscripts and the stained glass, the spirit that dreamt of a better world, even in the darkest of times. That spirit lives on in you, dear listener, as you slip into the realm of dreams. It connects you to the craftsman in his workshop, to the monk in his scriptorium, to the peasant in his field, to all those who came before and all those who will follow. So let that connection comfort you as you drift off into the peaceful oblivion of sleep. Let it remind you that you are part of something greater, something enduring, that your story, however small it may seem, is woven into the grand tapestry of human history. And let it give you strength to face the challenges of your own time, your own life, the strength to build, to create, to dream, to leave your own mark on the world, however humble, however fleeting. For that is the lesson of the medieval craftsman and of all those who came before and after him, that each life, each moment has meaning, that each of us has a role to play, a contribution to make in the great unfolding story of humanity. So play your part, dear listener, with skill and with love. Build your own cathedrals, whether of stone or of spirit. Illuminate your own manuscripts with the light of your unique vision. And when the night comes, as it must for all of us, rest easy in the knowledge that you have lived and loved and left your mark, that you have been a part of the human story in all its sorrow and all its glory. Good night, dear time traveller. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders of the ages and the quiet contentment of a life well lived. May you wake to a world made a little brighter by your presence, a little richer by your gifts. And may the echoes of the medieval craftsman's workshop and of all the workshops and all the workers of history resound softly in your sleeping ears. A gentle reminder of the endless cycle of creation and rest, of labour and peace that marks the turning of the great wheel of time. Sleep now and dream. Dream of ages past and ages yet to come. Dream of the infinite possibilities of the human spirit and of your own precious place in the vast, unfolding tapestry of history. Good night and sweet dreams until the dawn comes round again and the great work of living begins anew. The sun rises over the medieval landscape, casting long shadows from the towering spires of a great cathedral. The building seems to reach to the very heavens, a testament to the power and influence of the church in this age. As you approach, you hear the faint chanting of monks drifting from within, their voices raised in an endless cycle of prayer. You step inside, and the bustle of the outside world fades away, replaced by an ethereal stillness. Light filters through intricate stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in a kaleidoscope of colours. The air is thick with the scent of incense and burning candles. This is more than just a place of worship. It is the beating heart of the community. The cathedral serves not only as a spiritual centre, but also as a place of learning, charity, and even commerce. In the nave, the poor line up for alms, receiving bread and coin from the church's coffers. In the cloisters, young scholars pore over precious manuscripts, absorbing the wisdom of the ancients. But the church's influence extends far beyond these walls. In this age, the line between secular and sacred power is blurred. Bishops and abbots wield enormous influence, often serving as advisors to kings and lords. They hold vast tracts of land, overseeing farms and villages. Some even lead armies into battle, the cross emblazoned on their shields. The church is the guardian of knowledge and learning. In the scriptoria of monasteries across Europe, monks labour to copy and illuminate manuscripts, preserving the works of classical authors and church fathers. These are the seeds of the Renaissance, waiting to sprout. But the church is also a source of fear and superstition. From the pulpit, preachers rail against sin and heresy, threatening eternal damnation for those who stray. The Inquisition hunts down anyone suspected of deviating from church doctrine. In an age of plague and war, the promise of salvation is a powerful tool. As you wander deeper into the cathedral, you come upon a small side chapel. Inside, a lone monk kneels in prayer, his robes dusty from the road. This is Francis of Assisi, a man who will come to embody a new ideal of Christian devotion. Born into a wealthy Italian family, Francis enjoyed a life of privilege and pleasure in his youth. But a series of encounters with beggars and lepers led to a spiritual awakening. He renounced his worldly goods and took a vow of poverty, dedicating himself to a life of simplicity and service. Francis preached a gospel of love and compassion, seeing the divine in all of creation. He tamed a wolf that was terrorizing a village, seeing it as a brother. He composed hymns to the sun and moon, praising them as God's handiwork. His example inspired thousands to follow him, forming a new religious order, the Franciscans. They wandered the countryside, preaching to the poor and tending to the sick. They embodied a new model of spirituality, one based on humility, charity, and a direct connection to God. Francis's legacy would endure long after his death. His simple piety and love of nature would influence figures as diverse as Dante and Gandhi. In a time of religious schism and corruption, he offered a path back to the original message of Christianity. As you watch Francis pray, lost in silent contemplation, you feel a sense of peace wash over you. In a world of constant struggle and upheaval, his message of compassion and humility feels like a beacon of hope. But the tranquility of the moment is shattered by a sudden commotion outside. Shouts and the clatter of hooves fill the air. You rush to the cathedral door to see a breathless messenger stumble in, his face ashen. "The king is dead!" he cries. "Long live the king!" The old monarch has passed, and a new one must take his place. In the coming days, lords and bishops will gather to pay homage and swear fealty. But in the shadows, others plot and scheme, seeing opportunity in the transition of power. The great wheel of medieval life turns on birth and death, war and peace, following the eternal rhythms of the seasons. As you step back out into the sunlight, you feel the weight of centuries pressing down upon you, the countless lives that have come before, each leaving their mark on the tapestry of history. The road stretches out before you, winding through fields and forests, towards castles and keeps, villages and towns. There are more stories waiting to be told, more faces to meet, merchants and minstrels, knights and knaves, all playing their part in the grand drama of the Middle Ages. But for now, you feel the pull of sleep, the dream of the past fading into the soft warmth of your bed, the sounds of the medieval world, the tolling of church bells, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the laughter of children at play, all merge and melt into a soothing ambient hum. As you drift off, the faces of history swirl through your mind. William the Conqueror on his warhorse, Francis of Assisi surrounded by birds, Joan of Arc in her shining armour. They are all part of the rich tapestry of the human story, the never-ending quest for meaning and connection in an uncertain world. And while their world may be long gone, lost to the mists of time, their stories endure, whispering to us across the centuries. In our dreams, we walk beside them, sharing in their triumphs and their struggles, their joys and their sorrows. So let us dream together, you and I, wandering the winding paths of the medieval world. Let us listen to the voices of the past and find in them echoes of our own hopes and fears. And let us wake in the morning with a new appreciation for the long and winding road that has led us to where we are today. Good night, dear dreamer. May your slumber be filled with visions of castles and cathedrals, of brave knights and wise kings. May you find, in the stories of the past, a compass for navigating the present. And may you always remember that you too are part of the great story of humanity, a story that is still being written, page by page, day by day. The medieval world fades away now, like a tapestry gently folded and put away. But it will be waiting for you whenever you wish to return in the realm of dreams and imagination. So sleep now, and dream of days gone by, of a world that was both simpler and more complex, more brutal and more beautiful. Sleep, and let the lullaby of history carry you to a place of rest and peace. Good night. You blink awake in a strange, dimly lit place. As your eyes adjust, you realize you are no longer in your bedroom, but somewhere very different. A flickering candle illuminates roughly hewn stone walls. You're lying on a straw-filled mattress. The air smells of wood smoke, animals, and earth. Somehow, you have woken up in medieval times. Relax back into the straw mattress as we embark on a calming journey through this bygone era, walking in the footsteps of kings, peasants, merchants, and monks. Let the rich tapestry of medieval life gently unfold as you drift off to a deep slumber. You have awoken as a peasant farmer in a small English village. It's just before dawn and the rooster crows, same as it has for hundreds of years. You rise from your modest straw bed and pull on a simply spun tunic and breeches. The first order of the day is tending to the animals, feeding the chickens, goats, and enormous ox you use to pull the plough. The smells of hay, manure, and earth fill the air. You then join your family for a simple breakfast of barley porridge and stale bread in your small one-room cottage. The flavours are plain but hearty. As the sun rises, you head out to the fields to begin a long day of back-breaking labour, ploughing, planting, and harvesting crops of wheat, barley, and rye. The work is arduous, but there is a certain peace in the rhythm of the seasons. Your life is modest, but you take pride in working the land for the local lord in exchange for protection. Little do you know, one young peasant boy running through these same fields will rise to become one of the most transformative kings in English history. That young boy's name is William. Born a peasant, through a remarkable turn of events, he finds himself in the care of a local lord who takes him on as a squire. William takes to his new role with vigour, learning the arts of horsemanship, swordsmanship, and leadership. He catches the eye of the powerful Duke of Normandy, who eventually knights him. Through his wits, bravery, and a good deal of ruthlessness, William works his way into the Duke's inner circle. When the old Duke dies, William outmaneuvers other claimants to seize control of Normandy. But William has his eye on an even greater prize, the English throne, which he believes is his birthright. In 1066, he launches a daring invasion, leading to one of the most famous battles in medieval history. Tens of thousands of soldiers clash on a field near the small coastal village of Hastings. The Anglo-Saxons, wielding battle axes and forming an impenetrable shield wall, face off against the mounted Norman knights in a bloody day-long battle. William uses a fake retreat to draw the Anglo-Saxons out, then his cavalry charges, cutting them down. By day's end, the Anglo-Saxon king is dead, his army destroyed. William is crowned King of England on Christmas Day 1066 in Westminster Abbey, ushering in a new era. The Norman conquest will transform England, reshaping its language, customs, and aristocracy. French becomes the language of the court. William distributes lands to his loyal Norman barons, uprooting the Anglo-Saxon power structures. These barons build grand castles across the countryside, asserting Norman power. After William's conquest, castle building explodes across England as the new Norman elite solidify their rule. Motte and Bailey castles spring up, earthen mounds topped with wooden keeps, surrounded by ditches and palisades. Over centuries, these wooden structures give way to ever larger, more elaborate stone fortresses, the classic medieval castles of storybooks, with soaring towers, crenellated battlements, moats and drawbridges. Inside their thick stone walls, the great lords and ladies play out the dramas and intrigues of courtly life. Alliances are forged and broken over sumptuous feasts in the great hall. Minstrels and jesters entertain, while the lords plot wars and jockey for royal favour. Down in the bailey, a blacksmith hammers out swords and armour. Fletchers make arrows, and men-at-arms train for battle, the sounds of clashing steel echoing off the walls. Castles are symbols of wealth and power, but also refuge for nobles and commoners alike in times of trouble. The castle isn't the only dominant structure on the medieval landscape. Soaring cathedrals and monasteries also rise across Europe, asserting the power and influence of the Catholic Church. Monasteries serve as centres of learning, where monks painstakingly copy and illuminate manuscripts, preserving classical knowledge. They are also economic powerhouses, with vast land holdings worked by peasants. For many, the church provides education, charity, and the promise of eternal salvation, but it also instills the fear of sin and damnation. Preachers rail against greed, lust, and gluttony. Some, like the Benedictine monks, withdraw from the world into a life of prayer, chastity, and poverty. Others, like the powerful abbots and bishops, engage in worldly politics and even lead armies into battle. The line between secular and sacred power is blurry. Kings and popes vie for supremacy. Holy wars are launched to reclaim Jerusalem. In 1095, Pope Urban II calls on the Knights of Europe to embark on a holy mission, to free Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Muslim rule. Thousands take up the cross, sewing it onto their garments as a sign of devotion. The Crusaders capture Jerusalem in 1099 in a bloody struggle, establishing Christian kingdoms in the Levant. But holding this distant territory is a constant battle. More crusades follow over the next 2 centuries. For the crusading knights, it's a chance for glory, adventure, and salvation. But it's also a brutal, bloody conflict that sows seeds of religious enmity between Christians and Muslims. The Crusades also expose Europeans to the riches and sophistication of the East. They bring back spices, silks, and new ideas that will help fuel the Renaissance. But for now, life remains a daily struggle for most, even as great change looms on the horizon. Among the crusading knights who journeyed to the Holy Land was a young French noble named Louis. Born into a family of minor nobility, Louis was always a deeply pious child. As a youth, he spent hours in prayer and devotion, much to his father's dismay, who wanted him to focus on the arts of warfare and statesmanship. But when Pope Urban's call for the First Crusade reached their castle, Louis knew his destiny had arrived. Against his father's wishes, he took the cross and set out for Jerusalem, leaving behind his young wife and infant son. The journey was long and perilous. Louis saw many of his fellow knights succumb to disease, starvation, and the swords of the Seljuk Turks. But his faith never wavered. He believed utterly in the righteousness of their cause. When the Crusaders finally reached Jerusalem and breached its walls, Louis was among the first to enter the city. The slaughter that followed was terrible, with the Crusaders killing thousands of Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. Louis himself took no part in the bloodshed, instead falling to his knees in prayer at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. With Jerusalem secured, Louis resolved to stay and defend the newly established Kingdom of Jerusalem. He sent word to his wife to join him, which she did, making the long journey with their young son and a retinue of servants. For several years, Louis and his family lived in Jerusalem, with Louis serving as a knight in the service of King Baldwin I. He fought in several battles against the surrounding Muslim states, always distinguishing himself with his bravery and skill at arms. But the life of a crusader was a hard one, filled with constant warfare and the ever-present spectre of death. Louis saw many of his comrades fall in battle or succumb to the harsh conditions. His own wife fell ill and died, leaving him to care for their son alone. As the years wore on, Louis began to question the very nature of the Crusades. He had come to the Holy Land to defend Christianity, but the constant violence and bloodshed seemed antithetical to the teachings of Christ. He saw the way the Crusaders treated the local Muslim and Jewish populations, and it troubled his conscience. In 1120, after nearly 2 decades in the Holy Land, Louis made the difficult decision to return to France. He left his son, now a young man, to continue serving in the Crusader states and began the long journey home. The France that Louis returned to was much changed from the one he had left. In his absence, his father and elder brothers had died, leaving Louis as the unexpected heir to the family lands. He found his domain impoverished and in disarray, with rival nobles encroaching on his territory. But Louis had learned much during his time in the East. He applied the skills of leadership and diplomacy he had honed as a Crusader knight to governing his lands. Slowly but surely, he began to restore order and prosperity. He also brought back with him a newfound appreciation for learning and culture. In the Holy Land, he had encountered the rich traditions of Muslim and Byzantine scholarship, and he was determined to bring some of that knowledge back to France. He invited scholars and artisans to his court, establishing a library and a school. He commissioned translations of Arabic and Greek texts into Latin, helping to spur the intellectual revival that would lead to the Renaissance. Louis also worked to improve the lot of the peasants who worked his lands. Having seen firsthand the suffering and privation that was so common in the medieval world, he tried to be a just and compassionate lord. He reduced taxes, improved infrastructure, and established a system of courts to settle disputes fairly. As he grew older, Louis increasingly turned his thoughts to matters of the spirit. The violence and brutality he had witnessed during the Crusades weighed heavily on his mind. He came to believe that true Christian devotion was to be found not in warfare and conquest, but in peace, charity, and the cultivation of knowledge. In his later years, Louis retired to a monastery, where he spent his days in prayer and contemplation. He died there in 1148, at the age of 68, surrounded by the monks he had come to consider his brothers. Louis's legacy was a complex one. He had been a brave and skilled knight, an able administrator, and a patron of learning, but he had also participated in one of the most brutal and misguided enterprises in medieval history. In the end, perhaps his greatest contribution was the example he set in his later years, that of a man who had seen the worst of what the world had to offer and had chosen to respond with compassion, wisdom, and a commitment to peace. As you drift off to sleep, let your mind linger on the figure of Louis, a man who journeyed from the fields of France to the walls of Jerusalem and back again, and whose life was a testament to the enduring human struggle to find meaning and goodness in a turbulent world. But the medieval world was one of constant change and upheaval, where even the mightiest could be brought low by the turning of fortune's wheel. And as the 12th century gave way to the 13th, a new power was rising in the East that would once again set the stage for conflict and transformation. In the early 13th century, a young man named Temujin was rising to power on the steppes of Central Asia. Born into a clan of nomadic Mongol herders, Temujin's early life was marked by hardship and struggle. His father was murdered when Temujin was still a boy, and his family was abandoned by their clan to die on the harsh steppe. But Temujin survived, and through a combination of strategic alliances, military prowess, and sheer ruthlessness, he began to unite the disparate Mongol tribes under his rule. In 1206, at a gathering of Mongol chiefs, Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler of the Mongol peoples. Under Genghis Khan's leadership, the Mongols embarked on a series of conquests that would create the largest contiguous empire in world history. With their unparalleled skills in horsemanship and archery, their ability to travel vast distances quickly, and their brutal tactics of siege and psychological warfare, the Mongols proved unstoppable. They swept through Central Asia, conquering the Turkic states and the Persian Empire. They invaded China, capturing Beijing in 1215 and establishing the Yuan dynasty. They pushed into Russia and Eastern Europe, their cavalry reaching the banks of the Danube. To the people of medieval Europe, the Mongols were a terrifying and alien force, seeming to appear out of nowhere to wreak destruction and slaughter. Tales of their brutality spread far and wide, of pyramids built from the skulls of the vanquished, of whole cities put to the sword, of prisoners used as human shields in battle. But the Mongols were also known for their religious tolerance, their efficient system of governance, and their promotion of trade and cultural exchange along the Silk Road. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road became a conduit not just for goods, but for ideas, technologies, and artistic styles, linking Europe and Asia more closely than ever before. As Genghis Khan's empire expanded, it began to strain under its own size and diversity. After his death in 1227, the empire was divided among his sons and grandsons, who continued to expand Mongol rule, but also fought amongst themselves for power. It was one of these grandsons, Hulagu Khan, who would come to pose the greatest threat to the medieval Islamic world. In 1258, Hulagu's forces captured Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, slaughtering tens of thousands and bringing an end to the Islamic Golden Age. The fall of Baghdad sent shockwaves throughout the Muslim world. It marked a decisive shift in power from the Arab heartlands to the Mongol-ruled lands of Persia and Central Asia. It also opened the door for a new power to emerge in the region, the Mamluks of Egypt, who would defeat the Mongols in battle and establish themselves as the dominant force in the Islamic world. For the people of medieval Europe, the Mongol invasions were a source of both terror and fascination. The Mongols were seen as a scourge sent by God to punish the sinful, a people of Magog who heralded the end times. But they were also admired for their military prowess and their exotic ways. European envoys, missionaries and merchants ventured to the Mongol court, bringing back tales of the Khan's vast riches, his magnificent palaces, and the strange customs of his people. The Mongols, for their part, showed an interest in European culture and religion, with some Mongol princesses even marrying into European royal families. But the Mongol Empire was ultimately to be a fleeting one. By the 14th century, it had fragmented into competing khanates, which in turn fell to the rising powers of the Russians, the Chinese, and the Ottomans. The legacy of the Mongols, however, would endure. They had shaken the foundations of the medieval world, accelerating the pace of change and exchange across Eurasia. They had shown the power of the steppe peoples to shape the course of history, a power that would be echoed in later centuries by the Timurids, the Ottomans, and the Mughals. And they had left an indelible mark on the European imagination as a symbol of the strange and terrible forces that lurked beyond the edges of the known world. As you drift deeper into sleep, let your mind wander across the vast steppes of Central Asia, where the thunder of hoofbeats and the whistle of arrows once heralded the coming of the Mongol hordes. And remember that even the mightiest of empires are but fleeting things, subject to the inexorable tides of history. For even as the Mongols reshaped the world of the 13th century, other forces were stirring that would define the final centuries of the Middle Ages. Forces of plague and rebirth, of faith and reason, of discovery and transformation. In the 14th century, a devastating pandemic sweeps across Europe, the Black Death. It starts with rumours from the East of a terrible pestilence that leaves piles of dead in its wake. The disease arrives in 1347 on ships from Crimea. It spreads rapidly, carried by fleas on rats. People flee the cities, but the plague follows them. The symptoms are horrific: fever, chills, vomiting, and swollen, black buboes. Most die within days. Panic and despair grip the populace. Some blame Jews or witches. Others see it as divine punishment. The death toll is staggering. Between 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's population perishes. Fields lie fallow. Towns are abandoned. The social and economic impacts are profound. In the aftermath, labour is scarce. Peasants demand better wages and more rights, sowing the seeds for the end of serfdom. The plague will recur in waves for centuries, a grim spectre haunting the medieval world. One of those who lived through the first terrible wave of the Black Death was a young Italian man named Giovanni. Born into a family of wealthy Florentine merchants, Giovanni had always been a precocious child, with a quick mind and an insatiable curiosity about the world. When the plague struck Florence in 1348, Giovanni was just 18 years old. He watched in horror as the disease ravaged his city, claiming the lives of his friends, his neighbours, and finally his own parents and siblings. Bereft and alone, Giovanni threw himself into his studies as a way to cope with his grief. As the sun sets on another day in the medieval world, the bustling streets and fields grow quiet. Farmers and craftsmen return to their humble homes, while nobles retire to their grand chambers high in the castle keeps. In a small, thatched-roof cottage, a family gathers around the hearth for the evening meal. The fire crackles, casting a warm glow over their faces as they break bread and share a simple stew of vegetables and barley. The father, a weathered peasant with calloused hands, says a brief prayer of thanks for the food and for another day of life and health. After the meal, the children settle in for a story before bed. The mother, a kind-faced woman with a melodic voice, begins to tell a tale passed down through generations. It's a story of brave knights and fair maidens, of dragons and magic, of good triumphing over evil. The children listen with rapt attention, their eyes wide with wonder. Stories like these are the entertainment of the age, shared around fires and in great halls alike. In a time before books are common, they serve as both education and escape, teaching lessons of morality and courage while transporting listeners to realms of fantasy. As the story ends and the children drift off to sleep, the father banks the fire and the mother tidies the cottage. They too will soon retire for the night, to rest their weary bodies and rise with the sun to begin another day of toil. For most in the medieval era, life follows this simple, cyclical pattern. dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, the turning of the seasons. It's a hard life, one of constant labour and little leisure, where drought or disease can spell disaster. Yet there are also moments of joy and community in the celebrations of a good harvest, a wedding, or a saint's feast day. In the countryside, far from the bustle of the cities and towns, the night brings a profound stillness. The only sounds are the gentle lowing of cattle, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of the wind through the trees. Under the canopy of stars, the medieval world slumbers. But not all sleep. In the monasteries, the faithful keep their nightly vigils. Monks chant prayers in the chapel, their voices rising in ancient haunting melodies. In the scriptorium, scribes work by candlelight to painstakingly copy sacred texts and scholarly works, preserving the wisdom of the ancients. For these men of God, the night is a time of quiet devotion and reflection. They have forsaken the worldly life for one of contemplation and service, dedicating themselves to prayer, study, and the care of the poor and sick. In their gardens they grow medicinal herbs and tend to the ailing. In their libraries they safeguard the knowledge of the past and teach the scholars of the future. Theirs is a life of discipline and sacrifice, but also one of purpose and spiritual fulfillment. As the night deepens, even the monks retire, leaving the monastery in silence. The candles are extinguished, the books closed. Only the eternal light in the chapel remains, a symbol of the constant presence of God. In the cities, the night takes on a different character. Though the respectable citizens sleep, the taverns and inns are alive with activity. Here, travellers and locals alike gather to drink, gamble, and share news from afar. In a corner, a minstrel strums a lute and sings a bawdy ballad, much to the delight of the crowd. A group of merchants discuss the latest wares and prices, striking deals over cups of ale. A young scholar debates philosophy with an old soldier, their voices rising over the din. These are the places where social boundaries blur, where a peasant may rub shoulders with a nobleman, where a foreigner may find a welcome. They are the melting pots of the medieval world, where ideas and stories are traded as readily as goods and coin. But even these lively spaces eventually quiet as the night wears on. The minstrel packs up his lute, the merchants shake hands on their agreements, the scholar and soldier drain their cups and bid farewell. One by one, the patrons stumble out into the night, making their way home by the light of the moon. In the castle, the lord and lady sleep in their opulent bedchamber, attended by servants. For them, comfort and security are a given, their power and wealth ensuring a life far removed from the struggles of the common folk. But even they are not immune to the darker aspects of medieval life. Political intrigue, war, and disease respect no rank. A noble life can be snuffed out as quickly as a peasant's, by a blade in the dark, a festering wound, or a sweeping plague. And so, as the castle sleeps, guards pace the battlements, ever watchful for signs of threat. In the stables, a squire sleeps among the horses, ready to rouse at a moment's notice. Even in repose, the machinery of power and protection never fully rests. As the deepest part of the night approaches, a hush falls over the land. It's the quietest hour, when even the most restless souls succumb to sleep's embrace. In these moments, the medieval world seems to hold its breath, suspended between the labours of one day and the promise of the next. It's a time of dreams and visions, when the veil between the earthly and the divine seems thinnest. Some say it's in these hours that saints and angels walk the earth, that miracles are most likely to occur. Others whisper of darker things, of ghosts and demons, of witches' sabbaths and unspeakable rituals. But for most, this is simply the hour of deepest sleep, when the body and mind rest and repair, preparing for the dawn that will inevitably come. In cottages and castles, In monasteries and inns, the people of the medieval world slumber, their lives and fates intertwined in the great tapestry of history. And as we too drift in that liminal space between wakefulness and dreams, we can imagine ourselves among them, peasant or noble, monk or merchant, all equal in the eyes of sleep. Their world may be long past, but in these moments, it feels close enough to touch, a vivid dream of a distant era. So let us linger here a while, in this realm of quiet and shadow, and let the lullaby of history carry us gently into the embrace of sleep. For in the end, whether we wake in a modern bed or on a straw pallet, we are all threads in time's great weave, our dreams and stories intertwined across the ages. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders and mysteries of the medieval world. May you find rest and peace in the knowledge that you too are part of the great human story, a story that continues to unfold with each passing night and each breaking dawn. Sleep well and dream deep. As the night's final hours wane, the first stirrings of a new day begin. In the east, the sky lightens from inky black to deep blue, the stars fading one by one. The cock crows, a clarion call that echoes across the slumbering landscape. In the villages and towns, the people begin to wake, rubbing sleep from their eyes and stretching stiff limbs. The baker stokes his oven, the blacksmith kindles his forge, the farmer's wife starts the day's bread, the miller's daughter fetches water from the well. Slowly, the medieval world comes to life, each person taking up their role in the great dance of existence. The shepherd leads his flock to pasture. The weaver settles at her loom. The priest dons his vestments for morning mass. The monk takes up his quill in the scriptorium. In the castle, servants bustle to prepare the morning meal. The lord and lady dress for the day's affairs. In the courtyard, the knights and squires begin their training, the clang of sword on shield ringing out in the crisp morning air. And so, as one day ends, another begins, the cycle endlessly repeating. The medieval world is a place of constant motion, of birth and death, of sowing and reaping, of war and peace. It's a world of great hardship and great beauty, of cruelty and kindness, of ignorance and wisdom. For those who call it home, it's the only world they know, the backdrop against which their lives and loves, their triumphs and tragedies play out. They navigate its challenges and cherish its joys, finding meaning and purpose in the roles they've been given, in the beliefs they hold dear. And for us, looking back across the centuries, it's a world that fascinates and intrigues, that repels and attracts. We marvel at its accomplishments and recoil at its brutalities. We seek to understand its mysteries and learn from its lessons. In the end, perhaps, the medieval era is not so different from our own. A time of great change and upheaval, of conflict and progress, of individuals striving to make their way in a world they can't fully control or comprehend. And just as we look back on their time with a mix of nostalgia and critique, of admiration and horror, so too might future generations look back on ours. We too are living in a story still being written, our actions and choices shaping the course of history in ways we can only dimly perceive. So perhaps the greatest lesson the medieval world can teach us is one of humility and perspective. We are all, in the end, only brief candles against the long night of history, our individual lives mere flickers in the great cosmic dance. But what a dance it is, and what a privilege to be a part of it, to add our own small light to the sum of human experience. Whether we wake in a castle or a cottage, whether our days are filled with toil or leisure, we each have a role to play, a contribution to make. And so, as the medieval world stirs to life for another day, let us too rise to meet the challenges and opportunities of our own time. Let us learn from the past, but not be bound by it. Let us honour the wisdom of our ancestors while striving to create a better future for our descendants. For the great wheel of history turns on, and we turn with it, our stories weaving together across time and space, across culture and creed. And in the end, perhaps that is the greatest wonder of all, that in our infinite diversity, we are all at heart one human family, united by our common hopes and dreams, our common joys and sorrows. So let us greet this new day with open hearts and minds, ready to write our own chapter in the great book of human history. Let us take inspiration from the triumphs and failures of the past, but let us also have the courage to imagine a different future, one of greater justice, compassion, and understanding. And let us never forget that, whether we live in a time of darkness or light, of peace or strife, we are all part of something greater than ourselves, a grand and mysterious tapestry that stretches back to the dawn of time and forward to the horizon of eternity. This is the lesson of the medieval world, and of all worlds, a lesson whispered in the rustle of leaves and the babble of brooks, in the laughter of children and the wisdom of elders. It's a lesson that echoes in the stillness of the cloister and the clamour of the battlefield, in the quiet of a peasant's hut and the grandeur of a king's hall. And it's a lesson that we too can carry with us, a reminder of our shared humanity, our shared destiny, our shared hope for a world where all may wake to the dawning of a brighter day. So rest now, dear listener, and let the wisdom of the ages guide your dreams. For tomorrow is a new day, full of promise and possibility, and who knows what wonders it may bring. Good night, and may the peace of centuries past enfold you. May the hope of centuries yet to come inspire you. And may the love that binds us all, across all times and all places, forever light your way. As the day ends, you return to your humble cottage, your body aching from the long hours of toil in the fields. The setting sun casts a warm glow over the thatched roofs of the village, and the air is filled with the sounds of livestock being herded into pens for the night. You sit down to a simple meal of stew and bread with your family, the flickering light of the hearth casting dancing shadows on the walls. The conversation turns to the events of the day, the progress of the harvest, the health of the animals, the latest news from the neighbouring villages. As the night deepens, you climb into your straw bed, pulling a rough woolen blanket up to your chin. The sounds of the village fade away, replaced by the gentle crackle of the dying fire and the soft breathing of your family. Sleep claims you easily, your body and mind exhausted from the day's labours. But as you drift off, your thoughts turn to the wider world beyond your village, to the great lords and ladies in their grand castles, to the monks in their monasteries, to the merchants and craftsmen in the bustling towns. You may be just a simple peasant, but you are part of something much larger, a complex tapestry of social order and tradition that stretches back for centuries. The feudal system that governs your life is based on a strict hierarchy, with the king at the top, followed by the nobles, knights, clergy, and finally, the peasants, like yourself, at the bottom. It's a system that offers you protection and stability, but also demands your obedience and labour. The lord in his castle may seem distant and all-powerful, but he too has obligations to provide for the defence and justice of his people, and to honour his own vows of fealty to the king. These social bonds, whether between lord and vassal or master and apprentice, are the glue that holds the medieval world together. They are reinforced by the teachings of the Church, which emphasizes faith, humility, and one's proper place in the God-given order. But even as you sleep, forces are at work that will begin to challenge and transform this age-old system. In the towns and cities, a new class is emerging. The burghers and merchants who owe their wealth and status not to land and title, but to trade and commerce. Their world is one of guilds and charters, of contracts and loans, of the calculation of profit and risk. They are a breed apart from the nobles with their codes of chivalry and their disdain for the lowborn. And as their economic power grows, so too will their political influence. At the same time, the Church, long the dominant force in medieval life, is facing its own challenges. The corruption and worldliness of some of its leaders is becoming harder to ignore, and voices of dissent are beginning to be heard, voices that question the very foundations of papal authority. In the universities and monasteries, scholars are rediscovering the wisdom of the ancient Greeks and Romans, sparking a new interest in classical learning and humanist thought. They debate ideas that will come to shape the Renaissance and Reformation, ideas about the nature of man, the role of the individual, and the proper relationship between church and state. And on the horizon, a new power is rising, the power of the nation-state. As kings begin to assert their authority over the nobles and the church, they lay the foundations for the modern concept of sovereignty and centralized rule. But for now, these changes are still in their infancy, and the medieval worldview still holds sway. As you sleep, you are part of a society that is both deeply traditional and slowly evolving, a society that is about to be tested by plague, war, and religious upheaval. In your dreams, perhaps you catch glimpses of this future, of the towering cathedrals and bustling markets of the High Middle Ages, of the bloody battlefields of the 100 Years' War, of the printing presses and explorers' ships that will carry medieval Europe into a new era. But for now, the rhythms of village life go on as they have for generations. The sun will rise again tomorrow, and with it, another day of work and worship, of joy and sorrow, of the timeless cycle of birth, life, and death. As you sink deeper into sleep, let your mind wander through the tapestry of medieval history, from the fall of Rome to the dawn of the Renaissance. Let the stories of kings and commoners, saints and sinners, wash over you like a gentle stream. And know that you too are part of this great human story, a story that is still being written, even as we speak. Your life, your struggles, your triumphs and defeats are woven into the fabric of history, just as surely as those of the greatest lords and ladies. So rest now, and let the medieval world be your lullaby. Let the soft glow of the hearth and the murmur of your family's voices carry you into a deep and dreamless sleep. And may you wake in the morning to face the new day with the same strength and resilience that carried your ancestors through the challenges of their age. For the medieval world may seem distant and strange to us now, but its echoes are still with us, in the very foundations of our society and culture. And as long as we remember and learn from its lessons, it will never truly be lost. So sleep and dream, and know that you are part of a rich and enduring human tapestry, a tapestry that stretches back through the centuries and will continue on long after we are gone. Good night, and may your medieval slumber be filled with peace and wonder. As the night deepens and the village sleeps, let us turn our gaze to another figure who looms large in the medieval imagination: the knight. Born into the nobility, the knight is a warrior, a servant of his lord, and a paragon of chivalric virtue. From a young age, he is trained in the arts of war, in swordsmanship, horsemanship, and the code of honor that sets him apart from the common soldier. He learns to fight with lance and shield, to bear the weight of his armor, to face death and danger with courage and resolve. But the knight is more than just a warrior. He is also a symbol of the feudal order, a living embodiment of the values and ideals of medieval society. He is sworn to defend the weak, to honor his word, to serve his lord with loyalty and devotion. In times of peace, he participates in tournaments and jousts, displaying his prowess and valor for all to see. He courts noble ladies with poetry and song, striving to embody the courtly love ideal of the chaste and faithful servant. And in times of war, he is the backbone of his lord's army, the heavy cavalry that can break the enemy's lines and turn the tide of battle. He rides into combat with his banner fluttering overhead, his armor gleaming in the sun, his heart filled with the fierce joy of battle. But the life of a knight is not all glory and romance. It is also one of constant training and discipline, of long hours in the saddle and on the march, of the ever-present risk of injury and death. And as the Middle Ages wear on, the role of the knight begins to change and evolve. With the rise of the longbow and the cannon, the armoured knight becomes increasingly vulnerable on the battlefield. And as the feudal system begins to break down, many knights find themselves adrift, their traditional roles and loyalties called into question. Some turn to brigandage and mercenary work, using their martial skills for personal gain rather than noble service. Others seek new outlets for their energies, joining the Crusades or embarking on quests for the Holy Grail. But even as the age of chivalry wanes, the ideal of the knight remains a powerful one, a symbol of courage, honor, and devotion that will inspire poets and dreamers for centuries to come. And so, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander to the tawny fields and castles of the knights, to the clashing of swords and the flutter of banners in the breeze. Let their stories of valor and sacrifice, of love and loss, be your guide and your comfort in the darkness of the night. For in the end, the medieval world is a world of stories, stories of kings and queens, of saints and sinners, of the great and the small. And it is through these stories that we come to understand and appreciate the richness and complexity of this long-ago era. So let the tales of the knights be part of your own story, part of the great tapestry of human history that unites us all. And as you sleep, know that you are part of something much larger than yourself, a world of wonder and mystery, of faith and fear, of the eternal struggle between light and darkness. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the colours and textures of the medieval world, the glint of armour in the sun, the whisper of wind through the trees, the soft glow of candlelight in a castle window. For it is in our dreams that the past comes alive again, and we are all part of its enduring legacy. As you slip deeper into your medieval slumber, let us turn our attention to another figure who casts a long shadow over this age, the monk, clad in simple robes and bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The monk is a seeker of God and a guardian of knowledge, in a time when learning is a rare and precious thing. In the early days of the Middle Ages, as the Western Roman Empire crumbles and chaos descends upon Europe, it is the monks who preserve the flame of civilization. In their monasteries and abbeys, they copy and illuminate ancient manuscripts, keeping alive the wisdom of the Greeks and Romans. They also develop new forms of agriculture and animal husbandry, turning their monasteries into self-sufficient islands of order and productivity in a sea of disorder and want. And as the centuries pass, they become increasingly involved in the affairs of the wider world, serving as advisors to kings and popes, and even leading armies in battle. But at the heart of the monastic life is the search for God, a search that takes many forms and follows many paths. Some monks, like the Benedictines, seek God through work and prayer, dividing their days between manual labour and the divine office. Others, like the Carthusians, seek him through solitude and silence, withdrawing from the world into a life of contemplation and asceticism. And still others, like the Franciscans and Dominicans, seek him through service to the poor and the preaching of the gospel. Regardless of their particular vocation, all monks share a common goal: to draw closer to God through the discipline and devotion of the religious life. They rise before dawn to chant the Psalms, spend long hours in prayer and meditation, and strive to subdue their earthly desires through fasting and self-denial. And in doing so, they offer a powerful witness to a world that is all too often consumed by violence, greed, and the pursuit of power. They remind us that there is more to life than the fleeting pleasures of the flesh, and that true happiness and fulfillment can only be found in the love and service of God. As you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander to the cloisters and scriptoriums of the monks, to the sound of chanting voices and the scratch of quill on parchment. Let their example of devotion and discipline be a comfort and an inspiration to you, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a light that guides us home. And know that you too are called to seek that light, to follow the path of truth and goodness wherever it may lead. For the medieval world may be a world of great darkness and great beauty, but it is also a world that points beyond itself, to the eternal truths that lie at the heart of all human striving. So rest now, and let the peace of the monastery enfold you like a cloak. Let the prayers of the monks be your lullaby, and the love of God be your guiding star. And may you wake in the morning with a heart renewed and a spirit refreshed, ready to face the challenges and the joys of another day. For in the end, the medieval world is not so different from our own. A world of light and shadow, of hope and fear, of the endless quest for meaning and purpose in the face of an uncertain future. And it is only by embracing that quest, by seeking the truth with all our hearts and all our minds, that we can hope to find our way home. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the beauty and the mystery of the medieval world, the soaring spires of the cathedrals, the gentle glow of the scriptorium, the quiet footsteps of the monks in the cloister. For it is in the stillness of the night that we come closest to the heart of God, and it is in His love that we find our true rest and our true home. As the night wears on and the candles burn low, let us turn our thoughts to one last figure who looms large in the medieval imagination, the merchant. Born of the bustling cities and towns of Europe, the merchant is a new kind of man, one who owes his wealth and status not to land or title, but to his own wits and industry. In a world dominated by the feudal order, the merchant is an outsider, a man who moves between worlds and classes with ease. He travels the trade routes of Europe and beyond, bringing back exotic goods and ideas from distant lands. In the cities, he is a man of influence and power, a member of the growing middle class that will one day challenge the dominance of the nobility. He is a master of the art of the deal, a shrewd negotiator who knows how to turn a profit and protect his interests. But the life of a merchant is not without its risks and challenges. The roads are dangerous, beset by bandits and thieves, and the seas are treacherous, with storms and pirates lurking around every corner. And in the cutthroat world of commerce, one false move can mean ruin and disgrace. To succeed, the merchant must be cunning and adaptable, always ready to seize opportunity and avoid danger. He must navigate the complex web of guilds and monopolies that control trade in the cities and forge alliances with the powerful and the influential. And yet, for all his worldly success, the merchant is often viewed with suspicion and disdain by the traditional elites. To the nobility, he is an upstart and a parvenu, a man who has risen above his station through cleverness rather than breeding. And to the church, he is a potential threat, a man whose love of money and worldly goods could lead him astray from the path of righteousness. The merchant must walk a fine line, balancing his pursuit of profit with his obligations to God and society. But despite these challenges, the merchant class will play an increasingly important role in the centuries to come. As trade expands and cities grow, they will become the engine of a new kind of economy, one based on commerce and industry rather than land and agriculture. And as they do so, they will help to shape a new world, one in which the old certainties of the feudal order are gradually replaced by the dynamic and unpredictable forces of the market. The merchant may not wield a sword or a scepter, but in his own way, he is a key figure in the great drama of the Middle Ages. So, as you drift off to sleep, Let your mind wander to the bustling markets and counting houses of the medieval cities, to the sound of haggling voices and clinking coins. Let the stories of the merchants be your guide and your inspiration, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always room for hope and opportunity. And know that you too are part of this great tapestry of human endeavour, a tapestry that stretches back through the centuries and will continue on long after we are gone. For the medieval world may be a world of great challenges and great rewards, but it is also a world that reminds us of the enduring power of the human spirit. So rest now and let the dreams of the merchants be your lullaby. Let their tales of adventure and adversity, of risk and reward, carry you into a deep and peaceful slumber. And may you wake in the morning with a heart full of courage and determination, ready to face the challenges and opportunities of your own life's journey. For in the end, the medieval world is a mirror of our own, a world of darkness and light, of fear and hope, of the endless struggle to find meaning and purpose in the face of an uncertain future. And it is only by embracing that struggle, by daring to dream and to strive, that we can hope to leave our own mark upon the great tapestry of history. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the sights and sounds of the medieval world, the bustle of the market square, the gleam of gold and silver, the whispered prayers of the merchant before a long journey. For it is in our dreams that we are most truly free, and it is in freedom that we find the courage to face the challenges of the waking world. As the first light of dawn begins to peek through the shutters, you stir from your slumber, your mind still filled with the sights and sounds of the medieval world. The cockerel crows outside, heralding the start of a new day, and you can hear the village beginning to come to life around you. You lie still for a moment, savouring the warmth and comfort of your bed, the quiet peace of the early morning. And as you do so, you reflect on the journey you have taken through the pages of history, from the humble peasant to the lofty king, from the pious monk to the worldly merchant. Each of these figures has shown you a different face of the medieval world, a different way of living and thinking and being, and each has left you with a deeper appreciation for the richness and complexity of this long-ago era, for the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and tragedies that marked the lives of our ancestors. But as you rise to face the day ahead, you realize that the true gift of. As the gentle veil of sleep descends upon you, let us delve further into the rich tapestry of medieval history, focusing now on some of the most influential and fascinating figures of the time. One such figure was Eleanor of Aquitaine, a woman who defied the conventions of her era and left an indelible mark on the course of European history. Born in 1122 into the wealthy and powerful House of Poitiers, Eleanor was the granddaughter of the famous troubadour William IX and grew up immersed in the vibrant arts and culture of southern France. At the age of just 15, she inherited the vast Duchy of Aquitaine, making her the most eligible bride in Europe. Soon after, she wed Louis VII, the young King of France, in a magnificent ceremony. As queen, Eleanor brought a touch of southern refinement to the northern court, introducing the music, poetry, and courtly love traditions of her homeland. But Eleanor was no mere consort. She was a formidable presence, known for her sharp wit, political acumen, and fierce independence. In 1147, she even accompanied Louis on the ill-fated Second Crusade to the Holy Land, leading her own contingent of knights and ladies through the treacherous terrain of Anatolia. The crusade was a disaster, and the strains it placed on the royal marriage, coupled with Eleanor's failure to produce a male heir, led to its annulment in 1152. But Eleanor's story was far from over. Just 8 weeks after the annulment, she wed Henry Plantagenet, the young Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, who 2 years later would ascend to the throne of England as Henry II. As Queen of England, Eleanor presided over a court renowned for its sophistication and learning. She was a patron of the arts, a collector of books, and a savvy political operator, using her wealth and influence to support her sons in their rebellions against their father. But Eleanor's life was also marked by tragedy and tumult. Her marriage to Henry was tempestuous, marred by his infidelities and their bitter power struggles. In 1173, after Eleanor's support for her son's failed rebellion, Henry had her imprisoned, where she remained for 16 years. Yet even in captivity, Eleanor remained a force to be reckoned with. She continued to wield influence through her children, particularly her favourite son, Richard the Lionheart, who became king in 1889. Upon Henry's death, Richard finally released his mother, who rode out to meet him with a face of joy, despite her 70 years. In her later years, Eleanor served as regent while Richard was on crusade, skillfully navigating the treacherous waters of medieval politics. She travelled ceaselessly throughout England and France, shoring up support for her son and negotiating alliances, including the pivotal treaty with Philip Augustus of France. Eleanor died in 1204 at the ripe old age of 82, an extraordinary lifespan for the time. She had outlived 8 of her 10 children, 2 husbands, and most of her contemporaries. Her legacy was immense. Through her sons, she was the ancestor of both the English and French royal lines for generations to come. But more than that, Eleanor represented a new kind of queenship, one that was not merely ceremonial, but actively engaged in the politics and culture of the realm. She challenged the narrow confines of a woman's role in medieval society, proving that a queen could be a patron, a politician, and a power in her own right. As you drift off to sleep, let the extraordinary life of Eleanor of Aquitaine be a reminder of the remarkable individuals who peopled the medieval world. Men and women who, through their actions and their force of character, shaped the course of history in ways that still resonate today. Their stories are a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to create beauty in the midst of brutality, and to leave a lasting mark on the world. And as you slip into dreams, know that you too are part of this great human story, connected across time to those who came before and those who will come after. Another figure who loomed large in the medieval imagination was the great philosopher and theologian Thomas Aquinas. Born into a noble Italian family in 1225, Thomas was a precocious child who, at the age of just 5, was sent to study at the famous Benedictine Abbey of Monte Cassino. But Thomas's heart was drawn to the new mendicant orders, particularly the Dominicans, who emphasized poverty, preaching, and intellectual rigor. Against his family's wishes, he joined the Dominicans in 1244, a decision that would set the course for his life and work. As a young friar, Thomas studied under the great Albertus Magnus in Paris and Cologne, immersing himself in the newly rediscovered works of Aristotle and the Islamic philosophers. He quickly gained a reputation as a brilliant thinker, known for his clarity of thought and his systematic approach to theology and philosophy. Thomas's great masterwork was the Summa Theologica, a vast compendium of Christian thought that sought to reconcile faith and reason, revelation, and natural philosophy. In the Summa, Thomas grappled with the deepest questions of existence, the nature of God, the purpose of human life, the problem of evil, and the path to salvation. Central to Thomas's thought was the idea that faith and reason were not in conflict, but rather 2 paths to the same truth. He argued that the truths of revelation, while beyond the grasp of unaided human reason, could never contradict the truths of rational inquiry. For Thomas, the study of nature and the use of reason were not threats to faith, but ways of understanding God's creation and drawing closer to the divine. This idea would have profound implications for the development of Western thought. By insisting on the compatibility of faith and reason, Thomas helped pave the way for the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. At the same time, his emphasis on the rational basis of faith helped to shape the intellectual culture of the Church for centuries to come. But Thomas was not just an abstract thinker. He was also a deeply spiritual man, known for his humility, his gentleness, and his devotion to the Eucharist. In his final years, while celebrating Mass, he had a mystical experience that left him unable to write. "All that I have written," he said, "seems like straw to me compared to what has now been revealed to me." Thomas died in 1274, at the age of just 49, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the course of Western philosophy and theology for generations. He was canonized in 1323 and declared a Doctor of the Church in 1567. Today, he is considered one of the greatest thinkers in the history of Christianity, a man whose ideas continue to resonate and inspire. As you drift off to sleep, let the story of Thomas Aquinas be a reminder of the power of the human mind to grapple with the deepest questions of existence, and of the enduring quest to find meaning and truth in a complex and often confusing world. And let it also be a reminder of the importance of humility and wonder in the face of the divine mystery, the recognition that, for all our striving and all our knowledge, there is always more to be revealed, always further heights of wisdom and understanding to be scaled. The medieval period was also a time of great artistic flourishing, and nowhere was this more evident than in the soaring cathedrals that began to rise across Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries. These magnificent structures were not just places of worship, but embodiments of the medieval worldview, the belief in a divinely ordered universe, hierarchical and harmonious, in which every element had its appointed place and purpose. One of the most remarkable of these cathedrals was Chartres, located in the picturesque town of the same name about 50 miles southwest of Paris. The construction of the present cathedral began in 1194, after a fire destroyed much of the previous Romanesque church. Over the next few decades, thousands of workers labored to erect a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, a soaring symphony in stone that would become one of the most iconic buildings of the Middle Ages. At the heart of Chartres Cathedral is the labyrinth, a winding path inlaid in the floor of the nave. This labyrinth, unlike the later hedge mazes of Renaissance gardens, has only one path, leading inexorably to the center and then back out again. For the medieval faithful, walking the labyrinth was a symbolic pilgrimage, a miniature version of the great journey to Jerusalem that was the aspiration of every pious Christian. The labyrinth is just one of the many symbolic elements that pervade every aspect of the cathedral's design. The great western facade, with its 3 portals and rows of sculpted saints and biblical figures, is a stone Bible, a visual catechism for the largely illiterate medieval congregation. The soaring vaults and pointed arches draw the eye and the spirit upward toward the heavenly realms, while the play of light through the great stained glass windows creates an atmosphere of mystery and awe. But Chartres is more than just a work of art or a feat of engineering. It is a testament to the deep faith and communal spirit of the medieval world. The cathedral was not built by a single wealthy patron, but by the entire community, with rich and poor alike contributing their labour, their skills, and their resources. The construction site was a place of pilgrimage in itself, with workers coming from all over Europe to lend their efforts to the great endeavour. This sense of shared purpose and divine mission is reflected in the many legends that grew up around the cathedral's construction. One tells of a mysterious figure known as the Master of the Labyrinth, a genius architect who appeared one day and directed the building of the great maze, only to disappear just as suddenly when the work was done. Another tells of a miraculous beam of wood that, when the carpenters found it too short, spontaneously elongated itself to the required length. These legends speak to the way in which Chartres and the other great cathedrals of the medieval world were more than just buildings. They were expressions of a shared faith, a common culture, and a collective aspiration toward the divine. They were, in a sense, the embodiment of the medieval worldview itself, the belief in a universe suffused with meaning and purpose, in which every stone and every beam had its place in the great cosmic order. As you drift off to sleep, let the majesty and mystery of Chartres Cathedral be a reminder of the power of faith and community to create something greater than the sum of its parts. And let it also be an invitation to find in your own life those places and moments of transcendence where the everyday world falls away and you are caught up in something larger than yourself. For the medieval mind, such moments were a glimpse of the divine, a foretaste of the heavenly Jerusalem that awaited the faithful at the end of their earthly pilgrimage. And while our modern world may seem far removed from the certainties and hierarchies of the Middle Ages, the human longing for meaning and connection remains as strong as ever. So as you slip into the realm of dreams, carry with you the memory of Chartres and the other wonders of the medieval world, not as relics of a bygone age, but as enduring reminders of the heights to which the human spirit can soar when it is guided by faith, purpose, and a sense of its place in the grand tapestry of creation. The medieval period was also an age of great learning and scholarship, despite the popular image of the era as one of ignorance and superstition. In fact, the 12th and 13th centuries saw a remarkable flowering of intellectual life, centered around the great universities that began to emerge in cities like Paris, Bologna, and Oxford. One of the most important figures in this intellectual revival was Roger Bacon, a 13th century English philosopher and scientist who has been called the first modern thinker. Born into a wealthy family in 1214, Bacon studied at Oxford and Paris before joining the Franciscan order in 1247. As a friar, he devoted himself to the study of nature and the pursuit of knowledge, working tirelessly to expand the boundaries of human understanding. Bacon was a true polymath, with interests ranging from mathematics and optics to linguistics and alchemy. He was one of the first Western thinkers to argue for the importance of empirical observation and experimentation in the study of nature, and he made significant contributions to the fields of optics and astronomy, including a detailed description of the use of lenses for magnification. But Bacon was also a man ahead of his time, and his ideas often brought him into conflict with the authorities of his day. He was a vocal critic of the narrow scholasticism that dominated much of medieval learning, arguing that true knowledge could only be attained through a combination of reason, observation, and divine revelation. In his great work, the Opus Majus, Bacon laid out a sweeping vision for the reform of education and the advancement of knowledge. He argued for the importance of studying languages, particularly Greek and Arabic, in order to access the wisdom of the ancients and the cutting-edge science of the Islamic world. He also emphasized the need for a more practical and empirical approach to learning, one that would equip students with the skills and knowledge needed to navigate the complexities of the world. Bacon's ideas were met with suspicion and even hostility by many of his contemporaries, who saw him as a dangerous radical. He was accused of heresy and sorcery, and spent many years in prison as a result of his unconventional views. But despite the obstacles he faced, Bacon never lost his passion for knowledge or his belief in the power of the human mind to unravel the mysteries of the universe. In many ways, Bacon was a man out of step with his time, a visionary thinker who saw beyond the limitations of medieval science and philosophy, and who dared to imagine a world in which knowledge was a tool for the betterment of humanity, rather than a weapon of dogma and control. His legacy lived on long after his death, inspiring generations of scientists and thinkers who would build on his ideas and carry forward his vision of a more enlightened and rational world. As you drift off to sleep, Let the story of Roger Bacon be a reminder of the enduring power of the human intellect to push beyond the boundaries of the known and to imagine new possibilities for the future. And let it also be a call to embrace the spirit of curiosity and wonder that lies at the heart of all true learning. The desire to understand the world in all its complexity and beauty, and to use that understanding to make a positive difference in the lives of others. For while the medieval world may seem distant and foreign to us today, the basic human impulse to explore, to discover, and to create is as strong now as it ever was. And as we navigate the challenges and uncertainties of our own time, we can draw strength and inspiration from the example of thinkers like Roger Bacon, men and women who dared to question the received wisdom of their age, and who worked tirelessly to expand the frontiers of human knowledge and understanding. So as you slip into the realm of dreams, carry with you the spirit of the great medieval thinkers, their curiosity, their courage, and their unshakable belief in the power of the mind to illuminate even the darkest corners of the universe. And know that, in your own way, you too are part of this great and ongoing quest for truth and meaning. A quest that connects us across the centuries and reminds us of our common humanity. The figure of the knight looms large in our popular image of the Middle Ages, a figure of chivalry and romance, of brave deeds and courtly love. But the reality of knighthood was often far removed from the idealized image of the storybooks. To be a knight in medieval Europe was to occupy a unique and often precarious position, caught between the demands of feudal society and the changing realities of warfare and politics. One of the most famous knights of the medieval period was William Marshal, a man whose life embodied both the ideals and the realities of knighthood. Born in 1146 into a minor noble family, William was given as a hostage to King Stephen of England at the age of 5, a common practice in the feudal system to ensure the loyalty of vassal lords. Despite this inauspicious start, William would go on to become one of the most celebrated knights of his age. He distinguished himself in tournaments and on the battlefield, serving under 5 English kings and earning a reputation as a paragon of chivalry and honour. He was a skilled diplomat as well as a warrior, and played a key role in negotiating the peace between England and France in the early 13th century. But William's life was also marked by the harsh realities of medieval politics and warfare. He was captured and held for ransom several times, and fought in numerous battles and campaigns across Europe and the Holy Land. He saw firsthand the brutality and chaos of the Crusades, and the deep divisions within Christendom that they exposed. Despite these challenges, William remained true to his ideals of knighthood throughout his life. He was known for his loyalty, his courage, and his sense of fair play, even in the face of great adversity. He was a patron of the arts and a supporter of the church, and used his influence to promote justice and stability in a turbulent age. In many ways, William Marshal embodies the complex and contradictory nature of knighthood in the Middle Ages. On the one hand, knights were the embodiment of a high medieval ideal, brave, chivalrous, and devoted to the service of God and their feudal lords. They were the backbone of the medieval military system and played a key role in the expansion and defense of Christendom. But at the same time, knights were also deeply enmeshed in the brutal realities of medieval warfare and politics. They were often caught up in the endless cycle of feudal violence and revenge, and their loyalty to their lords could lead them into conflict with the broader interests of society. The ideals of chivalry, while noble in theory, were often honoured more in the breach than in the observance. As you drift off to sleep, as the echoes of the medieval world fade into the realm of dreams, let us linger a moment longer on the rich tapestry of life in those times. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the tolling of church bells. These were the sounds that marked the rhythm of daily existence. For the vast majority, Life was a struggle against the elements, against hunger and disease. The peasant in the field, the weaver at the loom, the mason chipping away at a block of stone. Their lives were defined by toil, their horizons often limited to the village or town of their birth. But even in the midst of hardship, there was community. The bonds of family, of shared labour and shared faith wove people together. In the evenings, around the hearth fire, stories were told, of brave knights and holy saints, of mischievous spirits and miraculous events. These tales, passed down through generations, provided comfort and wisdom, a way of making sense of the world. And what a world it was! A place of extremes, of soaring beauty and grim brutality. The same society that produced the delicate tracery of a Gothic cathedral also bore witness to the horrors of the torture chamber. The chivalric ideals of honour and courtesy coexisted with the harsh realities of feudal oppression. It was a world of hierarchy, where every person knew their place in the great chain of being. The king sat at the top, ruling by divine right, followed by the nobles, the clergy, the merchants, and finally the peasants. To question this order was to question the very will of God. But change was coming, slowly but inexorably. The growth of towns and trade, the spread of learning, the weakening of feudal bonds. All these factors were transforming society. The old ways were giving way to the new, even if the process would take centuries to unfold. One harbinger of this change was the rise of the merchant class. These were men who had grown rich not through land or lineage, but through trade and commerce. They were a new kind of power in the world, one based on money rather than might. In the great trading cities of Italy and the Low Countries, these merchants built palatial homes, patronized artists and scholars, and began to challenge the dominance of the old aristocracy. They were the vanguard of a new era, one in which wealth and enterprise would increasingly shape the course of events. But for now, in the sleepy villages and craggy castles of the medieval landscape, life went on much as it had for generations. The farmer tilled his field, the monk illuminated his manuscript, the lady embroidered her tapestry. Each played their part in the great drama of existence, bound by tradition and faith. As you drift deeper into sleep, let your mind wander through this lost world. Imagine yourself walking the narrow, winding streets of a medieval town, passing the open-air stalls of the market, the workshops of the craftsmen. Hear the cries of the street vendors, hawking their wares, smell the pungent mix of spices, smoke and humanity. Or picture yourself in a monastery garden, surrounded by the gentle hum of bees and the rustle of robes. Watch the monks at their work, tending their herbs and vegetables, copying ancient texts with painstaking care. Feel the sense of peace and purpose that pervades this cloistered world. And as you slip further into dreams, let the great events of the age swirl around you like mist. The clash of armies on a distant battlefield, the pageantry of a royal procession, the fervour of a religious pilgrimage. These are the moments that define the medieval era, that echo through history. But remember too the smaller moments, the ones that make up the warp and weft of daily life. The laughter of children playing in a sunlit field, the warmth of a fire on a cold winter's night, the comfort of a shared meal with loved ones. These are the timeless experiences that connect us across the centuries, that remind us of our common humanity. As you finally drift off into the realm of dreams, take with you a sense of the richness and complexity of the medieval world. It was a time of great darkness and great light, of cruelty and kindness, of ignorance and wisdom. And in its joys and sorrows, its triumphs and tragedies, it reflects the eternal human condition, the endless struggle to find meaning and purpose in a changeful world. So sleep now and let the distant strains of a lute, the soft chant of a prayer, the whisper of wind through a castle embrasure carry you into the depths of slumber. And as you dream, remember that you are part of a story that stretches back through the ages, a story of which the medieval era is but one chapter in an endlessly unfolding tale. The medieval world may be gone, but it is not forgotten. Its legacy lives on in the stones of our cities, the pages of our books, the very fabric of our thought. And as long as we remember and recount its stories, as long as we strive to learn from its wisdom and avoid its follies, it will continue to shape us, to guide us, to inspire us. So let us bid farewell to the Middle Ages, but let us not forget them. Let us carry their lessons with us as we navigate the uncertainties of our own time, as we seek to build a world that is more just, more compassionate, more enlightened. For in the end, that is the greatest gift that history can give us, the chance to learn from the past, to dream of a better future, and to make that dream a reality. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders and the wisdom of the ages. You blink awake as the first rays of dawn filter through the narrow window slit, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. The room is small and sparse, with walls of rough-hewn stone and a floor of beaten earth. A simple wooden cross hangs above the narrow bed where you lie, a reminder of the omnipresence of the church in this medieval world. You rise and stretch, feeling the coarse fabric of your monk's habit against your skin. The life of a monk is one of simplicity, devotion, and routine. You begin each day with prayer, kneeling on the cold stone floor of the monastery chapel as the first Mass is sung. The voices of your fellow monks rise in Gregorian chant, the ancient Latin words echoing off the vaulted ceiling. After Mass, you break your fast with a simple meal of bread and ale in the refectory. The fare is plain but nourishing, meant to sustain the body without indulging the senses. Gluttony is a sin, after all, and the monks are meant to lead a life of asceticism and self-denial. With breakfast done, you head to the scriptorium, the room where the monastery's precious books and manuscripts are kept. Here, monks spend their days painstakingly copying texts by hand, preserving the knowledge of the ancients and the teachings of the church. It is slow, exacting work, requiring great patience and skill. You settle at your desk, a slanted wooden surface with a hole for an inkpot. You take up your quill, dip it in the ink, and begin to write, carefully forming each letter on the parchment before you. The scriptorium is silent, save for the scratching of quills and the occasional cough or shuffle of feet. As you work, your mind begins to wander, reflecting on the role of the monastery in medieval society. Monasteries are more than just religious houses. They are centers of learning, charity, and economic power. They provide education for the sons of nobles and a place of refuge for the poor and sick. They also control vast tracts of land granted to them by pious donors, which are worked by peasants in exchange for the monks' prayers and spiritual guidance. But not all is peaceful within the monastery walls. Politics and power struggles are as prevalent here as in any royal court. Ambitious monks vie for positions of authority, currying favour with wealthy patrons and influential bishops. Some even dream of rising to the ultimate position, the papacy itself. As the day wears on, you set aside your quill and stretch your cramped fingers. It is time for the midday meal, a slightly more substantial repast of stewed vegetables, fish, and bread. The monks eat in silence, listening to one of their number read aloud from the Bible or the lives of the saints. After the meal, there is time for contemplation and study. You walk in the monastery gardens, enjoying the sun's warmth and the gentle buzz of bees in the herb beds. You watch a group of novices, young men just beginning their monastic lives, as they are put through their paces by a stern-looking master. They are learning the rule of Saint Benedict, the strict code that governs every aspect of monastic life. As the sun begins to set, you return to the chapel for Vespers, the evening prayer service. The monks' chants are slower now, more contemplative. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere of mystery and solemnity. After Vespers, you retire to your cell for a few hours of sleep before rising again in the dead of night for matins, the first of the canonical hours. This is the pattern of your days, a ceaseless round of prayer, work, and contemplation. It is a hard life, one of self-denial and discipline, but it is also a life of purpose and spiritual fulfillment. In a world rife with violence, disease, and uncertainty, the monastery provides a haven of peace and stability. It is a beacon of light in the often dark times of the Middle Ages. As you drift off to sleep, you reflect on the paradoxes of monastic life. To the outside world, it may seem a life of confinement and restriction. But for those called to it, it is a life of liberation, freeing the soul from the snares of the material world to contemplate the divine. In your dreams, you see the great monasteries of the age, Monte Cassino in Italy, Cluny in France, Lindisfarne in England. You see the monks at their labours, copying manuscripts, tending gardens, offering succour to the poor and weary. And you see the great saints and scholars that the monasteries have produced, Benedict, Bede, Alcuin, Bernard of Clairvaux. The monasteries are the guardians of knowledge and culture in a turbulent age. They are the bridge between the classical world and the Renaissance to come. And for now, in this moment, you are a part of that grand tradition, a small but vital thread in the great tapestry of medieval life. As you sleep, the night passes and a new dawn approaches. The monastery bells will soon ring out, calling the faithful to prayer, and you will rise, ready to begin another day in the service of God and your fellow man in this fascinating, challenging world of the Middle Ages. But for now, rest. Let the peace of the monastery enfold you and dream of a world where the light of knowledge and faith shines bright against the darkness. In the morning, that world will be yours to shape, one prayer, one deed, one moment at a time. The scene fades, and you sink deeper into sleep, the medieval monastery dissolving into the mists of dreams. The chants of the monks echo in your mind, a soothing lullaby from a distant age. And as you sleep, the wisdom and lessons of that age settle into your soul, enriching and enlightening, even as the modern world seems so far away. For that is the magic of history. It is never truly past, but alive within us, shaping our present and our future in ways we may not always understand. And in the depths of a medieval monastery, in the simple rhythms of prayer and work, in the quiet scratching of a quill on parchment, lie truths that echo across the centuries, waiting to be rediscovered by each new generation. So sleep now, and let the medieval world be your guide and your companion through the realms of night. In the morning, you will awake, perhaps with a new understanding, a new appreciation for the richness and complexity of the human story. And the medieval monastery, with its chants and its bells, its saints and its scholars, will be a part of you, a reminder of the enduring power of faith, knowledge, and the indomitable human spirit. As the night deepens, the script comes to a close, leaving you to your dreams and the endless possibilities of the medieval world. May your sleep be blessed with the peace of the monasteries, and may you awake refreshed, inspired, and ready to embrace the day ahead. But the journey through medieval history is far from over. There are still many more tales to be told, many more characters to meet, many more lessons to be learned. And so, as you drift off into the welcoming embrace of sleep, know that the story continues, waiting for you to take up the quill and add your own chapter to the never-ending chronicle of human experience. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders and the wisdom of the Middle Ages. Until next time, when we shall meet again in the pages of history, in the realm of sleep and story, and the enduring magic of the human imagination. Fare thee well, and sleep in peace, as the echoes of the medieval world fade into the mists of your dreams, let's turn our attention to one of the most fascinating and influential figures of the era, a man who rose from obscurity to become the most powerful ruler in Europe, and whose legacy would shape the course of history for centuries to come. His name was Charlemagne, and his story is one of ambition, conquest, and the forging of an empire that would lay the foundations for the modern nation-states of Europe. Charlemagne was born in the year 742 into a noble family of the Franks, a Germanic people who had settled in the lands of modern-day France and Germany. His father, Pepin the Short, was the first of the Carolingian dynasty to rule as king of the Franks, and he passed on his crown to Charlemagne and his brother Carloman upon his death in 768. But Charlemagne was not content to simply rule alongside his brother. He was a man of towering ambition, with a vision of a united Christian empire stretching across Europe. And so, when Carloman died unexpectedly, just a few years into their joint reign, Charlemagne wasted no time in claiming sole rulership of the Frankish kingdom. With a powerful army at his command, Charlemagne set out to expand his territories and bring the various peoples of Europe under his sway. He led his troops on a series of successful campaigns, conquering the Lombards in Italy, the Saxons in Germany, and the Avars in Hungary. As his empire grew, so too did Charlemagne's reputation as a great warrior and leader. He was known for his bravery on the battlefield, often fighting alongside his men and inspiring them with his courage and determination. But he was also a shrewd politician, forging alliances and using diplomacy to extend his influence far beyond the borders of his own kingdom. Under Charlemagne's rule, the Frankish Empire reached its greatest extent, stretching from the Atlantic coast of France to the borders of modern-day Hungary and Croatia. He established a system of government that would serve as a model for centuries to come, with a centralized administration, standardized laws and coinage, and a network of loyal nobles who helped to maintain order and collect taxes. But perhaps Charlemagne's greatest legacy was his role in the preservation and promotion of learning and culture. He was a patron of the arts and sciences, and he encouraged the spread of education throughout his empire. He brought scholars and artists from across Europe to his court at Aachen, where they worked to translate ancient texts, compile encyclopedias, and create beautiful works of art and architecture. Charlemagne's efforts to foster learning and culture would have a lasting impact on European history. The so-called Carolingian Renaissance that flourished under his rule saw a revival of classical learning and a renewed interest in the works of ancient authors like Cicero and Virgil. This intellectual flowering would lay the groundwork for the later Renaissance of the 14th and 15th centuries, which would transform European art, literature, and science. But perhaps the most enduring symbol of Charlemagne's legacy is the imperial crown that he wore as Emperor of the Romans. In the year 800, on Christmas Day, Pope Leo III placed a crown on Charlemagne's head in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, proclaiming him the new Emperor of the West. This coronation was a momentous event, marking the first time since the fall of the Roman Empire that a ruler had claimed the title of Emperor in Western Europe. It was a powerful statement of Charlemagne's authority and prestige, and a recognition of his role as the defender of the Christian faith and the protector of the Church. Of course, the reality of Charlemagne's empire was far from the idealized vision of a united Christian realm. His conquests were often brutal, and his efforts to impose his will on the various peoples of Europe were met with resistance and rebellion. The empire he built would not long survive his death in 814, as his successors struggled to maintain control over the vast and disparate territories he had brought under Frankish rule. But despite the challenges and setbacks he faced, there is no denying the immense impact that Charlemagne had on the course of European history. He was a towering figure who left an indelible mark on the medieval world, shaping its politics, culture, and religion in ways that would resonate for centuries to come. As you drift deeper into sleep, let the story of Charlemagne be a reminder of the enduring power of vision, ambition, and leadership. For even in the darkest and most turbulent of times, there are those who rise above the fray to leave a lasting legacy that echoes through the ages. And so, as the last embers of the day fade into the cool embrace of night, let your mind wander back to that distant time, to a world of kings and emperors, of knights and castles, of faith and learning. Let the gentle currents of history carry you off to a place of dreams, where the great figures of the past come alive once more, and the timeless tales of human endeavour unfold in all their richness and complexity. For in the end, the story of Charlemagne is not just the story of one man, but the story of us all, of the endless struggle to build something greater than ourselves, to leave a mark on the world that will endure long after we are gone. It is a story of hope and inspiration, of the indomitable human spirit that refuses to be bound by the limitations of the present, but instead reaches ever upward towards the infinite possibilities of the future. So let yourself be lulled by the soft whispers of the past as the great pageant of history plays out in your mind's eye. Let the cares of the day slip away and surrender yourself to the gentle embrace of sleep, secure in the knowledge that you are part of a grand and enduring tapestry, woven through the ages by the dreams and deeds of those who came before. And as you drift off into the welcoming arms of slumber, know that the legacy of Charlemagne and of all the great figures of history lives on in you, in the courage and determination that you bring to each new day, in the endless quest for knowledge and understanding that drives you forward, in the unquenchable thirst for beauty and meaning that stirs your soul. For in the end, we are all the inheritors of this great and glorious tradition, the bearers of a flame that has been passed down through the generations, from the dawn of civilization to the present day. And it is up to us to carry that flame forward, to nurture it and tend it, to pass it on to those who will come after us, so that the light of human progress may never be extinguished, but may shine on, bright and undiminished, for all the ages to come. So rest now, and let the dreams of history be your guide as you journey through the long and winding path of human experience towards a future filled with wonder and promise. For the medieval world may have passed away, but its spirit lives on in you, and in all those who dare to dream of a better world, a world of peace and prosperity, of justice and compassion, of endless possibility and untold adventure. As the great wheel of time turns on, carrying us ever forward into the unknown, let us hold fast to the lessons of the past and to the enduring values that have sustained us through the centuries. Let us be guided by the example of the great men and women who have gone before us, and let us strive always to build a world that is worthy of their sacrifice and their dreams. And so, as the last light fades and the veil of sleep descends upon you, know that you are not alone, but are part of a great and noble tradition, stretching back through the mists of time to the very dawn of human history. And know that, no matter what challenges and trials may lie ahead, you have the strength and the courage to face them, armed with the wisdom of the ages and the unshakable conviction that a better world is always possible if only we have the will to make it so. Good night then, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders of the past and the promise of the future. May you find rest and renewal in the gentle embrace of sleep, and may you awake refreshed and ready to take on the challenges of a new day, secure in the knowledge that you are part of a grand and glorious story, a story that will continue to unfold as long as there are those who dare to dream and to hope and to strive for a better tomorrow. As the dawn of the Renaissance brightens the horizon, the medieval world begins to fade into the mist of history, But before we bid farewell to this remarkable era, let us linger a moment longer, like a traveller savouring the last few steps of a long and wondrous journey. In the dying light of the Middle Ages, we see a world that is both familiar and strange, a mirror that reflects our own hopes, fears and dreams, but in a language that is hauntingly different. The great castles that once dominated the landscape now stand as silent sentinels, their walls whispering of battles fought, loves lost, and secrets kept. The mighty cathedrals, once the beating heart of medieval life, still reach towards the heavens, their spires a testament to the unshakable faith that sustained our ancestors through the darkest of times. But even as the old ways begin to crumble, the seeds of the modern world are already taking root. The printing press, that revolutionary invention, is spreading knowledge to the masses like never before. The great explorers are pushing back the boundaries of the known world, bringing back tales of exotic lands and peoples. And in the halls of the great universities, the rediscovered wisdom of the ancients is mingling with bold new ideas, sparking a renaissance of learning that will change the course of human history. As you drift deeper into sleep, let your mind wander through the winding streets of a medieval town, where the blacksmith's hammer rings out in the early morning air and the market square bustles with the chatter of merchants and townspeople. Imagine yourself as a pilgrim, setting out on a journey to some distant holy shrine, your footsteps echoing on the cobblestones as you pass by the great gates of the city into the wide world beyond. And as you travel, let the faces of the people you meet along the way flash before your mind's eye. The humble peasant, toiling in the fields from sunrise to sunset. The noble knight, resplendent in his armour, riding off to battle with a prayer on his lips. The wise monk, bent over a precious manuscript, preserving the knowledge of the ages for generations to come. Each of them a thread in the great tapestry of medieval life, woven together into a story that echoes through the ages. But perhaps the greatest wonder of the Middle Ages is not the grand deeds of kings and queens, nor the towering achievements of art and architecture, but the simple, everyday moments that make up the fabric of human existence. The laughter of children playing in the village green, the comfort of a warm fire on a cold winter's night, the joy of a bountiful harvest, the sorrow of a loved one lost. These are the moments that connect us across the centuries, the universal experiences that remind us of our shared humanity. And so, as you slip deeper into the embrace of sleep, let the medieval world be a comfort and a companion to you. Let its stories and its secrets whisper to you in your dreams, a reminder of the great chain of history that binds us all together. And when you wake in the morning, carry a little piece of that world with you, a talisman against the trials and tribulations of modern life. For in the end, the legacy of the Middle Ages is not just the castles and cathedrals, the kings and queens, the wars and plagues. It is the enduring spirit of humanity that shines through it all, the unquenchable spark of hope and resilience that has carried us through the darkest of times and will continue to guide us into the future. So let us bid a fond farewell to the medieval world, but let us never forget its lessons, its wonders, and its sorrows. Let it be a reminder to us of how far we have come and how far we have yet to go. And above all, let it be a source of inspiration and wonder, a wellspring of stories and dreams that will nourish our souls for generations to come. And with that, my dear listener, it is time for us to part ways. But before I go, let me leave you with one final thought. In this fast-paced, ever-changing world of ours, it is all too easy to forget the simple joys and beauties that surround us every day. So take a moment, whenever you can, to stop and marvel at the world around you, to gaze up at the stars, to listen to the song of a bird, to feel the warmth of the sun on your face. For in those moments, You are connected to something greater than yourself, to the vast and wondrous tapestry of life that stretches out across the ages. And if you have enjoyed our journey through the medieval world, if it has brought you even a moment of peace, wonder, or inspiration, then I invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. For there are still so many stories left to tell, so many wonders left to discover, and I would be honored to be your guide on those journeys. But for now, my friend, it is time to rest. Let the cares of the day fade away, and let the gentle rhythms of sleep carry you off to a world of dreams. And may you wake in the morning with a heart full of hope, a mind full of wonder, and a soul ready to embrace all the beauty and mystery that life has to offer. Good night, my dear listener, and sweet dreams, until we meet again on some other journey through the mists of history.